Are we ready to go, folks?
Underground Alliance.
What was that? Well, let's go ahead and get started then. So we need the closed meeting certification motion.
All right, I can do that. I move that this council certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each council member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Ms. Thomas, will you take the vote, please?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0. So we're now back in session for our 6:30 business session. And we'll begin the 6:30 business meeting with a moment of silence. Thank you. Councilors, any announcements?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make an announcement for the Continuing His Dream and His Works put on by Alexandre event. It will take place Monday, January the 16th from 1 to 3 at Carver Rec. It's going to be, I've been to these before, and it's really a great event for the family and everyone. Some of the things that they're going to have there is the Alicia Lugo Award. There's going to be a guest speaker. There's going to be some singing, dancing, and Alexandre is going to be speaking as well. And so it's just a great event. It's a partnership between Charlottesville Parks and Rec and Alexandre. So again, that's Continuing His Dream and Works, Monday, January the 16th from 1 to 3 at Carver Rec, and it's free.
And while we're also talking about other Martin Luther King Day events, the Martin Luther King Community Choir will be performing at the community celebration on January 22nd. That's Sunday, January 22nd at 4 p.m. at the MLK Performing Arts Center. If you want to sing in the choir, get back in touch with the folks who run that.
Another announcement, the Harambe Family Events is a calendar that highlights African American cultural activities in Charlottesville and surrounding areas. The calendar, created and designed by Mr. Alexandre, presents countless events from January 2023 to December 2023 and is now available. The Harambe, Swahili for All Pulled Together cultural events objectives are to inspire and unify area citizens to communicate more effectively and create and maintain a positive environment for change and civility. The calendar also strives to strengthen family relationships and nurture cultural awareness, particularly among African American residents who have experienced a lack of inclusion in many area events. The Harambe Family Event Calendar will be distributed throughout Central Virginia, and people can view it at alex-zan.com. In addition to that, just another reminder that in both Charlottesville and Albemarle, the plastic bag tax is now in effect. If you go to local businesses and use non-reusable plastic bags, you'll be charged 5 cents per bag. And if you are a SNAP or WIC beneficiary, you can receive 2 reusable bags for free. In addition, Refill Renew and Dogwood Refillery are accepting donations for reusable bags that will be distributed for free. And our local Sierra Club chapter is also looking to distribute reusable bags for free as well.
Okay. Any other announcements? Any proclamations or recognitions? If not, then Ms. Thomas, we're ready for the consent agenda.
Consent agenda. Items number 5 and 8 were moved to the end of the meeting. 2, minutes, December 5th minutes. 3, ordinance, private drainage easements at 2100 Avon Court, second reading. 4, ordinance, temporary aerial easement at 1223 to 1225 Harris Street, second reading. Number 6, designation of Park Street site as a revitalization area, one reading. 7, resolution, a resolution of support for the Virginia America 250 Commission, one reading. And
So
that's it.
we'll now take public comment regarding items on the consent agenda just read by the clerk. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. I should note, by the way, if you're following along on the program that you thought you had for the consent agenda, when we began the meeting at 4 o'clock, we moved number 5, which is the resolution of appropriation to amend the fiscal year 2023 budget, and number 8, the critical slope waiver application request for the Azalea Springs subdivision. Those will not be on the consent agenda, but will be on the action items. Items on the consent agenda.
Sorry.
Just read by the clerk. Each speaker will. Yes, technical gremlins. Those will be at the end, and so those are not on the consent agenda, and they are not what I'm talking about now. If you want to comment on the other items that were read by the clerk, this is the time. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. In the Zoom webinar, you may select the raise hand option to be placed in the speaker queue. If you have joined by phone and wish to speak on the consent agenda, you may press star 9. We'll alternate in-person and virtual speakers. Is there anyone in council chambers who would like to speak on any of the items on the consent agenda as amended? Yes, sir.
Number 9, then we go to the Art Center.
That is not on the consent agenda. The time for that will be in just a little bit. Anybody else who might like to speak on the matter on the consent agenda? Anybody online? Any virtual speakers?
Mayor Snook, there are no raised hands.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda as amended?
So move.
Second.
Any further questions or comments from council? Ms. Thomas, you take the vote, please.
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
All right, that passes 5-0 to adopt the consent agenda. Mr. Rogers, is there a report from the city manager's office?
Mayor, Council, there are a couple of items that we'd like to bring to your attention. We have scheduled a swearing-in for the new police chief, Michael Kodges, for January 17th at 4 p.m. here in Council Chamber. Also, the Labor Relations Manager, Jimmy Morani, has been hired and will join the City of Charlottesville in January. The new manager will be introduced at a future council meeting. The role will be critical to the implementation of the new collective bargaining ordinance passed by council last fall and is effective January 1. Proposals for the role identified under the new ordinance as Labor Relations Administrator, which receives petitions for recognition and conducts elections, will be received on January 11th. Representatives from Labor will serve on the evaluation committee with me. A selection will be made by the end of January with the capability to receive petitions in February, and with an expectation that we will begin to have the elections in February and begin negotiations in March. The city manager's office is, along with human resources, is putting a major emphasis on filling a number of vacancies that we have. We have a new recruiter Victoria Fallick, who will join the Human Resources staff in January and will be crucial to reducing the backlog of vacant positions. 7 proposals were received for the search for a strategic planning consultant. The evaluation committee has narrowed the proposers to 2, and we've had interviews with those 2. We expect to make a decision this week and begin the process of the strategic planning process in February to kick it off, and we expect that process will take about 4 months, trying to tie it in with our budget process so that the new plan will take effect on July 1. Deputy City Manager Ashley Marshall was very active last week as the weather got very, very cold. Ms. Marshall, you want to discuss some of your efforts with some of our partners as we sought to keep our residents safe?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of our community. During the cold snap, we're very thankful that we were able to work hand in hand with our nonprofit partners at The Haven, as well as at Pacham, to ensure that members of our community who found themselves unhoused were kept safe and warm. I'd like to thank the efforts from our Department of Human Services Director, Misty Graves, as well as our Department of Social Services Director, Sue Moffett, for their extraordinary and quick work to make sure that we were providing key supports to those critical nonprofits and the work that they do day in and day out. We would like to remind the community that if they have a loved one who finds themselves unhoused, or if they themselves are unhoused, they are more than welcome and encouraged to call the Homeless Intake Hotline. We will continue to publish that information both on our website and through our social media, with a thanks to our social media lead, Ms. Caroline Rice, just to make sure that that number is accessible for members of the community. But again, just a big thank you to our partners for working so well and collaboratively and quickly to ensure that we were able to make sure everyone was safe. And while we don't have that weather this week, we will continue to work to make sure that that kind of engagement occurs. Sir, that's all I have.
Thank you. And at the last council meeting, there was one of our residents who brought to our attention a concern about no lights being on Belmont Bridge. Mr. Sanders, you want to address what we've done about that?
Yes, sir. A few things. Good evening, council and members of the public. The reference last week, the last meeting, was about adding safe lighting along the Belmont Bridge. I'm happy to report that that project has been completed. It was already in progress. Solar lights had been ordered. The contractor has received all of those lights and installed them. At one point, we were thinking that they would be spread out about 100 feet apart, and instead they're 50 feet apart. So we actually have additional lights based on the request for additional lighting for safety purposes. In addition to that, I just want to share with everyone that we did release the CAF RFP today. There's $835,000 available. That application period will close on the 31st. That gives our housing providers an opportunity to apply for funding to add to our housing stock. And then lastly, the Downtown Mall Committee application period is concluded. We received 30 applications, probably have about half that number of seats available for this committee. We will be coming together this week to review those candidates and select the makeup for that committee, and then have that committee begin working on the work plan, which will be shaping the work that they will do this year into the beginning of next year.
Thank you, Sam. That, Mr. Mayor and Council, concludes the city manager's report.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've seen the lights on the bridge. They're very cute and effective. They're very nice.
I just want to do a special call out to city staff, particularly Ms. Marshall, and I'll make sure I have this right, Ms. Graves and Ms. Moffett, and their partners over at the Haven for their work helping the unhoused during that cold snap. I think we all had a sense it was going to get cold. I don't know that we had a sense it was going to get that cold. And then that it happened just before the holiday weekend.
Yeah.
I'm just grateful you all met and you came up with a plan and you executed against the plan, and I'm glad to see that sort of collaboration happening. So congratulations and thank you to all of you for doing that.
I just want to add Pacham and the Salvation Army in that because they were very much integral and part of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions, comments of the city manager? All right, so now it's time for the more general community matters. And this is at a time when you can speak on anything. We have 16 slots, nobody pre-registered, so we'll alternate between people here and people online. You'll have 3 minutes if you're calling in. Of course, again, it's on Zoom. You select the raise hand option to be placed in the speaker queue. If you're joining by phone and wish to speak on the consent agenda, you can press star 9. We'll alternate. First, is there anyone in person who would like to speak on any other item on the agenda, or frankly not on the agenda, anything at all? Did you want to?
The McGuffey Arts Center.
That this is the time to speak. Come on up to the microphone.
Actually, that item is a public hearing.
Yes, there are several public comments.
That's a public hearing.
Yes.
It's a public hearing.
This is not, well, there will be public comment at the end of the meeting.
The McGuffey item is a public hearing.
So they can comment then or
Oh,
they
that's
can
true.
comment now?
That's true, it is. Thank you. Thank you. Anything other than that? Anybody else? Mr. Groves?
Good evening and Happy New Year.
Happy
I'm
New Year.
James Groves, city resident. I'd like to share a few numbers for climate action in 2023. 1.2 degrees Celsius. That's how much the average surface temperature of the Earth has warmed since the year 1800. If we imagine temperature increasing at a constant rate, then our global temperature rises about 1/10 of a degree Celsius every 20 years. Unfortunately, temperature rise is not constant, but accelerating. Today, scientists indicate that global surface temperatures are rising by 1/10 of a degree Celsius every 3 to 5 years. At that rate, we will reach 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming before the year 2040, and 2 degrees Celsius by 2060. So, 1.2 degrees, increasing 1/10 of a degree every 3 to 5 years. 90 to 80 in the past 50 years. 80 to net zero in the next 50 years. Keep in mind that our global energy dependence on fossil fuels has dropped from 90% to 80% over the past 50 years. And scientists strongly recommend that we drop from 80% to net zero in the next 50 years. That's daunting. 25%. That's how much of Charlottesville's greenhouse gas emissions come from its municipal gas system. Will we have action this year to halt gas emissions growth? 10. Each and every month right now, the city of Charlottesville gives away about 10 free natural gas line installations, increasing local greenhouse gas emissions. 20,000. Those free gas lines represent about $20,000 per month in fossil fuel subsidies. 5% of Charlottesville's greenhouse gas emissions come directly from city operations. For operations that are directly under your control, including transit and school bus services, will we have action this year to reduce emissions? How many votes will City Council take this year to implement climate action? I can count at least 2. I anticipate you'll adopt the recently published Climate Action Plan. I anticipate you'll adopt zoning revisions that might reduce greenhouse gas emissions. 2. Will you take more than 2 climate actions? I'm certainly going to do what I can to encourage you to deliver a much higher number than that. On Christmas Eve, what will your number be? Thank Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Groves. Is there anyone online who would like to speak to us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, Gene Hyatt is the first raised hand.
All right.
Gene, you are on with council.
Hello. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good evening, Mayor Snook and councilors. I'm Jean Hyatt, and I live at Meadowbrook Heights Road. I have been following the request for a waiver to our steep slopes regulations for the Azalea Springs proposal. And I have sent in comments to both the Planning Commission and to the council. Watching the proceedings at the Planning Commission, we could see that all of the commissioners were unhappy with the choice they were presented with. And they did not have access to the report by the expert preservation arborist Keith Pitchford, who you now have that report. Now that we have all read that report, it's clear that granting a steep slopes waiver for this development would have devastating consequences for this area and actually lead to the damage and destruction of more trees than a by right project. Would also seriously degrade the Azalea Drive neighborhood and make it less livable. This is a community of moderate homes this is an area that we should be hoping to protect. And considering our newly adopted climate action plan, granting a waiver would be counter to the goals of the climate action plan. I urge you to resist granting a waiver and to follow the expert recommendations by the Tree Commission and the Preservation Arborist, Keith Pitchford. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hyatt. Next, we come back to in the chambers. Anyone wishing to speak on a matter that's not also a public hearing? Seeing nothing, is there no one? Is there anybody else online?
Our next speaker online is Nicole Scrow.
All right, Ms. Scrow?
You are on with council.
Hi, can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Thanks. Good evening and Happy New Year. My name's Nicole Scrow. I'm a land use attorney and real estate developer. I just wanted to talk about the zoning text amendment that's coming before you later this evening. The initiation is for the elimination of the 2-acre minimum for PUDs. The current request is tailored to be limited to just the urban corridor zoning district. I'm just requesting that the elimination of the 2-acre minimum apply to all zoning districts. It seems from the staff report that it is tailored the way it is to address one specific project. And I hope that that project moves forward and that we have more housing, but the elimination of the 2-acre minimum can impact other projects as well. And so I simply ask that council treat all projects fairly and consistently and apply the elimination of the 2-acre minimum to all zoning districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scrow. Again, anybody else in the chamber? No. Anybody else online?
Next up, we have Catherine Slaughter. You
Go
are
ahead,
on
Ms.
with
Slaughter.
council.
Thank you very much. I speak as a former mayor and retired environmental attorney who advocated for strengthening the critical slopes ordinance 15 years ago. As such, I urge you to vote against the waiver on Azalea Avenue that would allow the developer to destroy 8 acres of mature trees and degrade, and degrade a stream. I agree with the city's own tree commission and ask you to consider the assessment from its urban tree expert that Gene Hyatt just spoke of. The true level of canopy loss is 6 times greater than the applicant claims, he wrote. Moreover, due to grading and utilities, even the trees marked for preservation would not survive. The expert further explained the application is, quote, a gross misrepresentation of tree canopy loss, tree preservation efforts, and seriously distorts forecasts of reforestation to offset these losses. You're poised to endorse the city's climate change plan, Yet this project would further exacerbate climate change by destroying an important pocket of urban trees and the ability of this area to absorb carbon and rainwater runoff. I had not thought about the historic nature of this site until an Azalea resident told me she had investigated the court records of Azalea Hall, built in the mid-1800s. It had 2 cemeteries, one for white family members and one for the enslaved. The white cemetery is behind a house on nearby Garden Street, but where is the enslaved graveyard? This forested area could have been used for that purpose. Moreover, prior to European settlement, the indigenous Monacans may have lived in this area. An archaeological study could shed light on any of these. Please vote no on the waiver, but in the alternative, if you choose to send it back to the Planning Commission, ask that they consider the Tree Commission's expert testimony and also require an archaeological study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lauder. Nobody else has come in, so is there anybody else online?
We have one more raised hand at the moment, Joan Albiston.
All right, Ms. Albiston?
You are on with council.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Joan Albiston, and I have owned property at 301 Azalea Drive for nearly 30 years. I sent a letter to you in December opposing the critical slopes waiver for Azalea Springs when the Planning Commission was considering the waiver at that December 13th meeting. I sent an email to you today reiterating my view and attaching a copy of that letter and expressing dismay that the city is moving forward with the climate action plan while at the same time considering approval of the critical slopes waiver for Azalea Springs. The waiver request does not meet the standards of findings to qualify for approval. The property on which the development is proposed is not appropriate for standard single-family development. Please consider the information as well that the Charlottesville Trees Commission has provided to you, along with a report by their expert arborist. I also agree with many of the things that Kay Slaughter has just told you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Albiston. Anyone else?
Mayor Snook, there are no additional hands.
All right, so we will close this portion of the community matters. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. And then we will move on to the first action item, which is the public hearing on the lease agreement with McGuffey Arts Associates for the lease of 201 2nd Street Northwest. Ms. Kelly will present us.
Good evening.
And then we'll get to your public comment.
For the record, Brenda Kelly with the Office of Community Solutions. The item you have in front of you is a request to approve a lease agreement with the McGuffey Arts Association for the lease of the city-owned building and property located at 201 2nd Street Northwest. But before we get into specifics of the McGuffey lease, I'd like to share information with you on this lease agreement document. This is a new format that was prepared by the city attorney's office that more closely reflects a standard commercial lease agreement. The reason that I thought it would be important to review this document is that we intend to generally use this format going forward, but customize it for each specific property lease agreement that comes to you for approval. More generally, for those leases for standalone buildings and properties. So you may see other forms for different types of uses. So here are some items in this document that we would like to bring to your attention that you may not have seen in previous city leases. In Article 4 and Article 17, we will be getting confirmation that the use is allowed by zoning before the lease comes to you for approval. In Article 5, we have included a fair market rent value and an in-kind financial contribution by landlord to tenant value. This allows us, as well as the tenant, to document that additional in-kind contribution for the city for the difference in the rent payment as to a fair market rent. In Article 7, we are now requiring a security deposit equal to 2 months' rent upon execution of the lease agreement. In Article 10, we have discussed the insurance requirements with the city's risk staff and have included that information in this document. We will include much more specific information as to tenant responsibilities, landlord responsibilities, and maintenance repair information, and city inspection information. Our wonderful City Public Works facilities staff have worked hard to document terms of use, which now will be included in leases as an exhibit. Before I go on with the McGuffey specifics, do you have any questions as to this general format in this document?
I don't. I appreciate the effort to bring that greater degree of standardization.
I'm sorry, I did not have the time that I usually do to review some things. Covered in this document, is it standard that the city will keep upkeep of the buildings, or will the tenant?
That will be customized, like I said, specific to the property. Right now, the city is providing a lot of those services on a lot of the properties. And so with the McGuffey lease, I'll give you some specifics on how that may change.
And is there also then a place in the document to start tallying how much that cost is to the city if we are maintaining it as well?
Yes, that we will have to come up with some type of system working with the appropriate department on what those costs will be. They may be a little bit more time coming to get to that, but yes, that is one of the intents.
And also, would that also then include if we are paying for any of the utilities, et cetera? I don't know if any properties that we would be, but just in case.
We can look into that. That may be a number that's a little bit harder to get, but we can try to look in that.
And there's one issue that it's a more esoteric issue. It's not something that can really be as codified in a lease. Is that we have a number of facilities that we have engaged with various groups throughout the city who have been renting from us. And it's almost gotten to the point where it's even forgotten about that it is. And it has been a confusing maze, and I really, really appreciate how you have been navigating this. I do have, is the standard going to be a 5-year in each lease, or is that going to change depending on the leases?
That will basically be a policy decision. So in this particular case tonight, where we're recommending a 5-year lease, that is why a public hearing is required, because the state statutes require anything 5 years or more for the use of public property to be a public hearing.
Okay.
If we even did something that was like a 1-year lease with 4-year extensions, that would still require the public hearing. But if we did less than that, that would be specifically called out in the lease. In this particular case, the McGuffey folks had asked or requested that they have that longer lease term as they have had in previous leases. So they have that that foresight of being able to know how long the lease is, instead of wondering from year to year if the city's going to kick them out or something.
So, and I understand that. I worked in nonprofits, and where you're going to be time to time is a big thing that hangs over your head. But the other thing, I just philosophically, that we also need to be addressing is, how are we maintaining city assets as a reflection of changing mindset and changing needs and changing values in a city? And I think that's just something we need to be thinking about in general, about is an agreement that we started in the 70s still reflective of the needs of the community? It might very well be, but what's happened is things have become rote and therefore never re-looked at as to whether or not they are still meeting the needs of the city of Charlottesville. And I think one of the things we should be asking anybody who rents from us, or because especially if they are getting any sort of deal, and I'm sorry that McGuffey is being the organization right now who is coming forward to this. This is not meant to be focused at McGuffey. This is meant to be just in general. That we're making sure we're asking each organization, how are you still addressing the vision that we see our city? What need are you addressing in our city for this in-kind donation that we are giving you in terms of reduced rent? And I just ask that we keep thinking about how we request various places to show us. It's a nebulous thing. So it's going to be harder than, a monetary something that you can put into a spreadsheet. And it's just something that we need to be thinking about and how we're going to be evaluating how we utilize those assets.
Good points. Ms. Kelly was asking about any other issues relating to the broad terms of the lease. If not?
Yeah, I don't guess it's specific to McGuffey, but I guess there's the fair market rental rate and then what we're actually going to require. Will you speak to that in just a minute?
So in our previous discussions, when we came to you with an overall view of the leases that the city was a party of, we reached out to the property assessor's office to get what they thought was a value on the lease. And generally, we got a range. And then I'll work very closely with the Office of Economic Development to get any updated information they may have on commercial values for the area. That's also in your agenda item that provides that information. So we kind of look at all those values to come up with a general number. It's okay. A guess, but yeah, at least we have something that's backing it up a little bit.
And if I'm reading it right, it's about twice as much as what we're actually going to charge?
It's a lot more than twice.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's about 500. I can look it up, but it was over $500,000 difference.
Yes. Correct.
I think the twice figure
would be
compares to the taxes that would be generated if we were to give it away and then tax it to the person who had received it. The suggestion was made that we would make more than twice as much back in taxes as we're making every year in rent. So,
without the parks land value included.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So,
should I keep going?
Sure.
Okay. Now, specific to the McGuffey lease in front of you, the McGuffey Arts Association has leased this building from the city since 1975. The proposed lease rate is $2,593 a month with an automatic annual increase of no more than 3%. The proposed lease period is for 5 years, expiring December 31st, 2027, and as we've discussed, a public hearing is required for that 5-year lease term. The city will be responsible for maintenance of structural items and some landscape services, and those are now spelled out in this lease document, where previously in most of our leases it wasn't specific on what the city would be doing and the tenant would be doing. The tenant will be responsible for such items as grass mowing, general building and property maintenance, janitorial services, utilities, and insurance, and the tenant is accepting the property in an as-is condition. So one item that you brought up specific to this is previously the city has provided all landscaping, mowing, and ice and snow removal city services at the city's cost. In this lease agreement, we are proposing that we require the tenant to now be responsible for mowing and ice and snow removal. We've had discussions with the McGuffey representatives, and they are concerned that they will have to find folks to provide this service. So they've asked either that the city continue providing these services, or at the least, if the city can provide the services and invoice them or bill them for those costs. So that you may hear from the McGuffey folks on that tonight. So as you know, we have representatives from McGuffey that would like to give you a brief presentation and talk to you about what they are doing in providing services to the city. They're also here to answer any questions you might have, and I'm happy to answer any questions also.
I actually did have 2 other questions. Do we need to authorize any changes to the space? If the tenant comes in and wants to take out a wall or wants to do changes, rehabilitation, is it in the lease that we have to authorize those changes?
It's in this lease, and it will be in this template coming forward that any alterations require approval.
I didn't get it down in time. I'll remember it later. Sorry. Oh, is there going to be somebody who's going to inspect the premises on a regular basis?
So we're going to work on that as we write the policy and procedures. What's in this document, this lease document, it says we may provide annual inspections or inspections on a lease renewal or a new lease. So our intent is to get a regular process in place that we do that and get better at that.
And would this lease also apply to the businesses in the parking garage that we own?
This particular format will
Yes.
not.
Okay.
Office of Economic Development basically oversees those, and the city attorney's office had previously worked on with them to develop a type of format that they rent out those spaces. So this particular document or format is more tailored to a standalone building and property.
Okay. Do we have any for-profits that the city leases to through this mechanism? Or
Can
all-
I look into that and get back with you?
Because as I'm thinking through things, it seems like most of the for-profits are through the economic development area and probably through CETA more.
I would tend to agree with you, but let me go through our list and double check and let y'all know.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Kelly, I had one question. So the entire building is filled up by the McGuffey folks? There's not like a separate area that we could rent out to someone else? In other words, they fill the entire space pretty much.
So this lease covers the entire building and the property, and it also authorizes McGuffey to enter into subleases, which is how they do it with the tenants, the individual tenants they have, which are the artists.
Got it. And are they using the whole building?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep, they were very gracious and gave me a tour of the whole facility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Clarifying thing? Oh,
Yeah, I had a couple of, so, I mean, just in general, I think I have no idea like how much it is for the mowing and snow removal, but ideally, we would want to have the tenant to be billed for that.
Okay.
And concerning the use of the space, I've been in there several times. It's wonderful space. What if the city needed to use it? I'm thinking I guess there's any provision in there, like if we had a special event, the city government, that we could work with them to use the space or, a part of the space if it was available type of thing.
Let me look while
Yeah.
they're talking, because I seem to remember a discussion about that, but I'm not sure it's in this document.
Kind
Yeah,
of like
and-
what's with the pavilion?
Hmm?
Like what's with the pavilion where we get a certain amount each
Yeah,
year?
yes, I hadn't thought about that, but yes. Yeah. And my last comment is that, that not just for the McGuffey, but for all of our rental agreements, that somehow we are able to check to make sure that they're in line with our efforts for equity and inclusion. And I've been to the McGuffey Art Center several times, and I know that they are. I love the work that they're doing. But, we just want to make sure that is a way we could, if someone's not, or we hear something, because I didn't realize until I got on council, but we have a lot of different properties that we're leasing and things like that out there. So that's just in general, if it may not be anything we could put in a legal document, but it's something that we should be able to check on.
What I'll try to do in the future then is bring you some information on the residents they serve or their constituent base or something, see if we can get that information before it comes to you.
Good, thank you.
Well, I suppose the interesting question would be whether there is any provision in the lease that is sort of like sometimes in public endorsement deals, you have a morals clause. It's if you do anything offensive, then we get to terminate the agreement. And I was just looking through it fairly quickly. It looks like it's a fairly standard, purely real estate, no, none of these other things. So I don't know that we would have any authority if somebody was not behaving in an equitable manner. I don't know if there's anything in here that would allow us to do anything about that.
We had a lot of outs in this, as well as the tenant, so I'll take a look at that
Okay.
too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
That's kind of where I've
Yeah.
just, how do we, this is a very while it's not coming out of the coffers, therefore it doesn't hit our budget. At the same time, it is funds that we could be bringing in. And so when we are looking at these city properties, we need to figure out what is it we are getting for the constituency that is that equal value. And again, that can be a very nebulous thing, but it's really important that we make sure that that's being addressed.
Okay. I agree. Shall we hear from the public? Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Okay, same rules, up to 3 minutes. If you want to be online, joining us, this is a public hearing on.
Did McGuffey have a presentation for us?
Yes.
Oh. All right.
Is that right? Okay.
Thank you for having us here this evening. I'm Amanda Laskowski. I am the Executive Council President this fiscal year 22-23 at McGuffey Art Center, and I am a performing artist in dance. I want to thank Brenda and all the council members who have taken the time to come visit us and speak with us, and also those of you who we've conversed with over email for your support and your feedback about our programming. A little bit about us. We are an arts association that's run like a cooperative, run on committee and on sweat equity. We have 100 associate artists in our community who exhibit in our space and teach in our space, as well as 50 renting members who have studio space residing in the building and take on the governance and the committee work for the day-to-day operations, as well as some part-time staff. We currently have 6 incubators and 2 residency artists also in the spaces who receive mentorship and free or reduced rent to help them kickstart their art. In our fiscal year 2021-22 annual report, you will have seen that just circulated via email, so it's there for your reference. One item I'd like to highlight for you is our partnerships with the Charlottesville High School, International Neighbors, UVA Arts Mentors Program, and the Charlottesville Boys and Girls Club, providing art experiences and mentorship for middle school and high school students, which continues this year as well. Also wanted to announce a partnership this year with the Charlottesville Black Arts Collective, who will be selecting and placing the artists that are in our residency space, receiving free rent and mentorship in their art, and community in their art, as well as opportunities to exhibit with us. And we already had established a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that continues this year, and they are currently in the process of reviewing our handbook and all of our policies with an eye towards opportunity and access and inclusion. And they are making recommendations at each of our governance meetings. And I will also highlight, since the annual report period ended in the last 6 months, we also had a really exciting Dia de los Muertos event in late October, which brought foot traffic of over 700 members of the public to enjoy this cultural event. Others might be more familiar with that and might speak to that later, so I won't give all the details. But I've just spent a bit of time here with you all speaking to the current activities at McGuffey, and I'm going to cede the floor to a longtime McGuffey member, Judy McLeod, who's going to speak to the past and the future vision for McGuffey. But I would also just like to emphasize that we always want to hear your feedback and be an integral part of the strategic vision for the city that we are in, and play a big role in the creative economy here as well. So I'll give it over to Judy, and also myself and any of our council members and staff who are present and members are available for answering questions. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Judy McLeod, and I am a Charlottesville resident, long time. And I thank you for reviewing the lease at McGuffey Art Center so carefully and assiduously. I thank you and all of your predecessors in the council for the many years that we've been here, for our long, positive, fruitful, and creative relationship between the McGuffey Art Center and the city of Charlottesville. We are in our year 47, and that means we're nearing our 50th anniversary celebration, which will be in 2025. As a very young woman, I was a founding member, so do the math. I've been around, and now I'm the resident historian. During these grand decades, we have enjoyed proudly our relationship, our dual relationship with the city of Charlottesville and with the city government and councilors. We're proud of that. We have nurtured and enjoyed a lively and creative relationship with the Charlottesville City Schools. I know, because I was the one over there on the other side in the schools, making sure it happened. And we all work with Aaron Icorst, who's in the city schools coordinator of fine and performing arts. And our stately art center, during our time of tenure, has been put on the historical register. And we have invested numerous leasehold improvements to our galleries and to our open studios that are open to the public during public hours, 6 days a week. In addition to that, McGuffey Art Center is now, when you look online, it says top places to visit in Charlottesville. There we are. Okay. Now, all that's history. Let's look forward. We have all suffered the tragedy of the pandemic. But now that we're reopening, we are reviewing, renewing, and revising everything about how to be in our new world, and we really are. Examining traditions, some of which you had mentioned, and policies that were voted on a long time ago, and so we are eagerly at this point restructuring as needed, especially with regard to DEI and J going forward. And I think that during the time that we've been there, almost 50 years, I've been there, there have been about 500 resident artists people who've come there and had residency. That's not even including all the things. What do we give to you? Let me tell you a few things. 45 open studios open to the public. We have hundreds of visitors a year, thousands of visitors a year. We have 5 galleries for members and outside organizations like, faculty at UVA have exhibited there, the Botanical Garden. So we provide space for art exhibits for other groups in our community. We have classes for children and adults with an ongoing endowed scholarship fund that has been going for many years for free or reduced classes. And before COVID, there was an outreach, and we will do this again, to find through the city school teachers kids who should be getting classes there. And in addition to that, we have collaborations with City of Promise, Boys and Girls Club. We're doing a big thing with them this coming spring, and the senior centers. And also, I don't want to fail to mention international exchanges with Bay Sanson and Pojo. Am I saying that? Pojo. And also Cape Town Powerhouse. We had a exhibition, and that was jointly with University of Virginia and McGuffey Art Center. So it's not, and that is a gift to the community of Charlottesville, to bring artists and performing artists from other places. So let's go on. Let's get going. Do you have any questions we can answer? No?
I do have one question. Do you know how many of the 45 artists in residence are city residents?
I'm sorry, I don't. Well, it's easy to find that out. Yeah. We have actually we have 45, and then the 5, we have more like 50 something, but no, sorry. Don't have that answer. Easy to get, though. We can.
Okay.
We'll let you know.
That's as again,
right,
as city council and the city
right,
supplementing the rent, is how many of the participants are city residents.
We'll let you know. Okay.
And specifically, I was wondering, as somebody moves forward in their art, and gets, I guess, in a more permanent place in their life and can afford either to build their own studio in their home, or do people continue a studio at McGuffey too, or is everyone very active?
Well, that's what we're always trying to ensure. There are short-term members, but if you take 500 over 45 years, you could see approximately something in that range. There are people who come and stay for a year or two and move on, and then there are some people who have, and I'm one of them, who have been a long time there. That is important to the running of the McGuffey, as we're this artist-run center. One of the the oldest artist-run art center in the nation. We are. That means that a lot of the more experienced artists or longer-term artists are the, keep everything rolling. We're always looking for new and young, but it is also incumbent on this changing, evolving group that some people continue. There's something different about an art center than a commercial art center. A commercial art center makes commercial art, which makes money. We are a fine arts professional center of dancers and actors and musicians and visual artists and sculptors who are prestigious, even with national reputations, who will never make a living doing the art that we do. And to a person, well, there's only a couple people who don't work other jobs. I was in the city schools, so that we can continue. So it's not that same kind of graduation to the big time that the people from the Darden say.
I mean, I've known a number of McGuffey artists over the years, and I know some have built studios at their home as
Right,
time went
and
on,
that's-
and they
and that
more in
happens.
their other job, they got raised up throughout the year.
Mhm.
And I was just, I guess what I get concerned about is sometimes as creativity ebbs and flows, and somebody might be using the discounted rent as a storage, easy, don't want to shut this down in my life space.
Well, that's the executive council's job every year, to patrol the halls and the membership, to be sure that everybody there is a vital and contributing member to the association and is validly using the terms of the lease that we have had that say you have to do this. You have to be on the committee and do your job. You have to pay your rent. You have to spend a certain number of hours there. And if you don't, so, any more questions?
Not from me.
It was brought up earlier, the concerns that you all had about the on-site maintenance. Is that something you could speak about in more specifics in terms of both the cost, and then I guess there was an expressed concern about how you would procure individuals to do that work?
Right. I'm not on council right now, so let them.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Wistrel. I'm the Vice President of Council right now, and that was something that we noticed because the cities are always taking care of snow removal, ice management, and lawn care, I guess. So our concern was if that was something we had to take on immediately, which is the lease would start right now. So especially with snow and ice removal, we felt like it was safer for the city to keep doing that, and you can bill us at the end of, or however that would work. That's an agreement that we would have to make. We're happy to take that expense on if that's something that is desired. That was something that is in the lease that we saw, and we approve everything. We have talked with Brenda about that. But so that was just something that we were hoping would happen, that we could stay on the schedule of lawn mowing and ice and snow, which is probably the same schedule that would be there for the schools, right? If there's snow or ice removal that needs to be dealt with, because that's just something that we would feel safer having you continue to do that. So I don't know if that's possible, but that was something that we discussed with Brenda, that possibility.
And do we know, even if it's just kind of a bit of a ballpark number, I mean, what would that cost be per year if they were to do it to the city?
No idea. Do you know?
Be reimbursed.
So we have reached out to the Public Works Department and Parks and Rec Department to try to estimate what that is and get more specifics to provide to McGuffey, as well as, is it a one-time request to please do this for this lease, annual lease, or is it a per service, like when they see, the weather getting bad or something like that? We still have to work out all those specifics.
And maybe something we just don't know at this point, but is that a number that's like 100,000, 50,000, 10,000, 5,000?
We don't know at this point, but we will provide that information to the McGuffey folks when we get it, before we get their confirmation that they'd like to keep the city providing those services.
And last fiscal year, McGuffey's net income was 26,000?
The annual report is online. I think that's just.
That was what was in the agenda memo, the 26,400 was from the annual report of 2020, 2021.
This is a new one, right? So,
Okay.
I guess the concern, since we don't know what that amount would be, we're in the middle of doing working on our budget. So as far as this next 6 months and the spring and summer would be, I guess, a trial. Obviously, if the city is doing that and the expense is much more than if we were to find someone to do that for us. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's something, it's an unknown from our perspective and your perspective, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that's my concern. I mean, your annual net income is the past few years $10,000 to $26,000. We don't know the costs that we're going to be imposing on you.
Correct.
Really, with no foresight to give you that we were going to do this. I just have some concern about that in terms of not giving you any runway for fundraising or anticipating that. I mean, if it's like $3,000 a year or whatever, fine. But if it's $100,000, like that's a pretty big adjustment. But
That's your decision to make, I guess.
yeah, those are all the questions I have.
If there's any other questions?
Just wondering, Ms. Kelly, if you could, in the current lease that we're seeing tonight, what does it say relative to how is it currently set up relative to this topic of whether they pay us or we just do it? In other words, the old model was we just took care of it, right?
Correct.
And we're moving away from that. And we're saying either the center needs to pay for the services themselves on their own, or we take care of it and we bill them.
So we list other services or amenities provided by the landlord, and that is trimming, mulching, stuff like that the city will continue to provide.
Okay.
And then we have a section, this is Article 14G, other services or amenities. Upon request by tenant, landlord agrees to remove snow and ice from parking areas, sidewalks, and walkways. Landlord will submit an invoice to tenant for these services provided.
What about mowing?
And then under the tenant's responsibility, that's where we have mowing and ice and snow removal as their responsibility.
Okay, but they can request us to take care of the ice and snow, and we bill them. What about the landscaping? Is that something as well that they request of us and we do and bill them?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if Mr. Sanders is listening. I'm sure he is. I don't know if he's available. Put him on the hot seat. I mean, I have a hard time thinking this is more than $10,000 a year. Do you have any data at hand in terms of what we've spent, or is that something you have to spend some time finding?
No, we would have to spend time. This has been an ongoing process of trying to more or less capture what the priorities are for council as this work has been going on. We don't have those figures available at this time to be able to anticipate what the cost would be. I regret not having that, but I understand that that's been part of what we're trying to figure out is what is council's pleasure for providing services, not providing services, and in what instances do you provide services and not? Because at this moment, we as staff don't necessarily know what to do.
Understood. So I guess we could approve this provisionally and then 6 months from now modify it if we had to, Ms. Kelly?
5-year lease. Yes, we could do that. We could also provide you information as soon as we come up with those numbers, and if McGuffey accepts or has concerns, we can get back with you and let you know that.
So is that an option to?
If I could ask a question, I'm sorry. Ms. Davies, is it possible for us to amend the terms of this lease and suggest that the first year we leave it the way it currently is, where the city will cover those charges, thereby giving a 1-year runway to McGuffey to then be able to handle it, and by then we will have done the necessary work to resolve what the true costs are?
I believe so. I mean, there's a modification provision in the lease that contemplates the ability to change the terms by mutual agreement. So I think that we could certainly, based on that portion of this lease that was shown to the public, we could probably come up with an additional exhibit or attachment that address some of those issues.
So I would provide that, councilors, as an option for how we might be able to resolve the short notice aspect of what the cost and the unknown aspect of the cost, providing a 1-year runway.
Yeah, I like that suggestion.
Yeah.
So tonight, the notion would be that we approve what we have in front of us with the proviso that basically a verbal amendment that we would put together this plan that you're just, the idea that you just discussed as,
It's 2 readings, right?
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry,
one
I'm
reading.
sorry.
I don't think we want verbal amendments to a written lease.
Yeah, so this is Allison Davies again. I think that what we would need to do is invoke the modification provision in the agreement, draft a modification, and have both McGuffey and the city sign that agreement after we had reached a further understanding about that amendment to the lease. So I think that before the council tonight is whether or not to move forward with this lease, and then with the understanding and direction to staff that we would be looking to enter into a modification, a narrow modification with respect to the maintenance services that are provided.
Okay.
Well, why would we not simply say, looks good to us, come back in 2 weeks with the final language?
So I think you could certainly do that if that is the council's pleasure, and put it back on the agenda. I think that because you won't be voting to adopt this lease tonight, and you will be asking for some revisions and modifications when we put it back on the agenda, we will need to have another public hearing.
That makes the most sense to me.
I mean, I just, as I've said a number of times, I hate the idea that we're going to leave things loose when, with a passage of 2 more weeks, we can have them nailed down.
I think that's fine, council.
And if it means we have to
certainly put
officially
this back on
advertise
the
it again, so be
subsequent
it. but
agenda.
we didn't-
From a legal perspective, I don't know, staff might have additional concerns or considerations they might want to raise.
That's fair.
It would be my recommendation that we follow your suggestion.
And it could be on the consent agenda, right?
I assume.
We still need to have the public.
We have the public hearing.
Oh, okay, it would, okay.
Well, yeah, we have to have a public hearing tonight. If we have the public hearing tonight and we have that one change we're going to make, I don't know that we have to re-advertise it and have another public hearing over one change.
So I guess the devil's in the details on that, Mayor Snook. How many changes they're going to be? If, as I was suggesting, if we can invoke the modification provision and have it be a very narrow change in a 1-page exhibit about landlord services, I agree with you.
Well, if you have any doubt about it, we'll just re-advertise it. I just think it's important that it be done in writing, finally resolved. We all move on. We know exactly what we're dealing with, and
And just to be clear, Mayor Snook, we don't actually, because it's only a 5-year lease, we do the public hearing, but it doesn't require some of the additional procedural requirements that we have with longer leases. So it certainly wouldn't be difficult to do that modification.
Okay.
And so for this particular month, they would just go forward on their month-to-month lease?
It would continue to be a holdover because Brenda, I might need to defer to you on, I believe that the lease has expired at this point.
Yes.
Yes, it has. And just to remind the council that there was a provision in the one-time amendment or extension we did that said it expires the end of December, but since it's already in progress, we consider that we're in good faith moving forward on it.
So if we deferred for 2 weeks, it wouldn't be the end of the world in terms of...
We're still in the
I don't
month of
believe so.
January. They still get January at a reduced rate, but then come February, either way, they're at...
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got one more question for you. This hazardous materials section, do we have a writer that we're going to sign off on? Because half the things that are considered hazardous materials are what artists use.
We have a section in there that they just need to provide us the information and pictures and information on all those things that may comprise that.
Like how things are being stored or?
Yes, and they
Because-
have a fire inspector come in on a regular basis. They
Okay.
have the kiln and some other equipment, so that's all listed in here specifically that they just have to inform the landlord.
I just didn't want this to be some sort of like, I was just like reading, it's like paint.
Yes.
Petroleum based, I was like, okay, yeah, that's solvents.
At least specifically mentioned cyanide.
Well, yeah.
Anyway.
No
Okay.
peaches.
Now, let me just say, the one issue we have not, well, actually, we should still do the public hearing, and then we can talk about some other
Yes.
things. Okay. McGuffey all heard from?
Our presentation is done.
Okay.
Public hearing, yes.
Is there anybody else in the room who would like to speak on a matter of public, as a matter of the public on this issue? Is that where you come in?
Just very quickly, my name is Estella Knott. I've been a member of the McGuffey Arts Center, I think probably for about 11 or 12 years now. And I'm incredibly grateful for the space. I am a music teacher, a performer, and a community organizer within the Latino community. We've been doing the we started the Civil Sabroso Festival. Were any of you able to make it to the Civil Sabroso Festival this year? The Civil Sabroso Festival started at the McGuffey Arts Center. Because I am of Mexican descent and I love my community and feel that we have a rich cultural heritage, and when immigrant people come to our community here in Charlottesville from different parts of the world, they bring with them so much from their cultures that are rich visual arts, performance arts, food, dance, values, traditions. And so we started the Civil Sabroso Festival with Sin Barreras. They were our partners in this, and one of the reasons why we did it is because we see these rich cultural traditions that people bring with them when they come to our city. And we wanted to bring it into the center of Charlottesville, and McGuffey is in the center of Charlottesville. And it started at McGuffey with about 400 people who came to the celebration. It was raining that day. It was a beautiful time that we had that grew from the McGuffey Arts Center to become a 7,000 people festival that welcomes up to 7,000 people a year. We had to shut down for the Civil Sabroso Festival for the pandemic, and then came back this year. It expanded from the McGuffey Arts Center out into the community, the Ix Art Park, and then we just moved to the Washington Park this year. I also started a Dia de los Muertos event at the McGuffey Arts Center. We had our 11th annual Dia de los Muertos event this past year with, I think it was, what was it, did I say? 700 people in attendance this year. We had an international mask maker from Mexico who came with some traditional masks that are used during the Day of the Dead event that is traditionally from Mexico and other parts of Latin America. The reason why I raised this up is because McGuffey has provided me with a space to welcome my community into a space that is owned by the city of Charlottesville and hosted by artists, is made possible by artists like Judy, who have held this space for 47 years. As Amanda mentioned, McGuffey is run off of sweat equity. I was on council. I was president of McGuffey last year. We all rotate. We all have to sit on council within 5 years of being at McGuffey. That can be anywhere from 30 to 60 hours a week that we have to put in on top of the jobs that we do, and it's a lot of work.
Your time is up.
What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, so I wanted to say thank you for this space. It does provide a lot for the community. Thank you for hearing my comments.
Okay. Is there anyone online who would like to speak on this public hearing?
Mayor Snook, I see no raised hands.
Is there anybody else in the room who would like to speak on this public hearing? Seeing nobody, then we'll close the public hearing. The matter is now with council. Let me say, we've talked a lot about how we might deal with this one issue of not trying to catch folks by surprise, changing the rules as far as snow and grass and so on. Let me say, one of the things that I haven't quite figured out what I think about this, but as a general proposition, I have been concerned, as long as I've been on council, about the fact that we do not treat our various landlord-tenant relationships the same way. That for basically everyone is unique, and not simply because of individual bits of language that may differ here and there, but the overall economic relationship is different. And one of the things that we are hoping that at some point in the next year or two we'll start to figure out with Ms. Kelly's help is to wrap our arms around all of these different relationships, because one of the things that happens is that whenever we say to somebody else, well, you should be paying more rent, they say, well, what about McGuffey? Or what about the Discovery Museum? Or what about somebody else? And I don't like to be in the position of seeming to treat what looks like it ought to be roughly the same category in very different ways. As was noted earlier, the amount of rent that we would receive, even with the increase, would be roughly 40% of what the taxes would be if we gave the property to you and said, now pay us taxes. I don't know that I'm necessarily inclined to say that at some point down the road we ought to be looking for everybody to at least pay the amount of the taxes, though that kind of makes a certain amount of sense to me, that if we're foregoing $50,000 a year in taxes, we ought to at least get $50,000 in rent. That would mean a significant increase for you all, and I'm not saying we should be doing it now, but I would say that I would suggest that we consider a program by which, say, 5 years from now, we have everybody who's sort of bumped up, that we've made that runway, so to speak, to a greater degree of financial contribution. I say that purely as a matter of, it's a little bit further along than thinking out loud, but not a lot. It's kind of where I think I would like to end up being with all of this in a few years. But I'm not proposing it now. I think the fact that we're proposing a 20% or 25% increase in the rent this 1 year is itself a significant thing. But I would really like to encourage everybody who is working in, or who's doing stuff in city-owned space and paying a way, 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 way below market rate to think a little bit more about how you might raise some more money to make it so that it's not so painful for us to have to subsidize you.
And I'll say I look at it a little bit different than that. I think the conversation we've had tonight has been good, and it's good that we're having an upfront conversation about leases. And I do think that we should frame it outright as these leases are basically a subsidy and support for public spaces and nonprofits. And to me, the relevant policy question is, do we want to support public spaces and nonprofits in a particular space? McGuffey is a strange space, and I think that's a good thing. I think it shows a lot of foresight and vision on the part of city government many decades ago, that they wanted to create a public space that wouldn't just be driven by profit. And I think we should maintain that, because as our city continues to gentrify, truly public spaces where you don't need $30 to come and spend time with other people or enjoy something are pretty rare. And if we decide we want to keep a public space, and the question below that is, do we think that the nonprofit or entity there is the best one to make use of that subsidized space? And when it comes to McGuffey, at this point, it seems like it is. I'm not aware of any proposal for any different nonprofit to move in there. I say if we were going to charge, if we decided that we're going to charge market rate, we should accept that we want to do away with public spaces and have this be another Dairy Central or for-profit business, which I don't think, I'm glad we haven't yet neoliberalized the entire city, but maybe we'll get there someday.
And what to the whole city?
Neoliberalized. And for the record, I have not suggested that.
And I'm not suggesting you are. And what you suggested is still a subsidy, a rather large one. And I guess the final thought is, if we decide that we want to maintain subsidy and support for public spaces that aren't just driven by the market for profit, I'm not entirely sure what we're gaining by kind of saying the city wants to get $10,000, $20,000 here to have them do basic maintenance, or we want the rent to be $5,000 or $10,000 from the perspective on the city. I think we should just make a decision whether we're all in or all out on supporting a nonprofit public space. I'm just not sure what we materially gain from saying we really want to crack down and get $15,000 additional.
Well, and the other question that I have, Councilor Payne, about the maintenance of the outside of the building. So then we have to have some sort of criteria that, you know, is acceptable to the city, to Parks and Rec or whoever does outside spaces, of what counts as appropriate snow removal or landscape maintenance. And then, you know, the folks at McGuffey are going to have to go, I guess, get bids from local contractors to figure out who can match those requirements. And it seems like it might just be simpler to have the city do it. But I would be interested in knowing the cost of what that is every year.
Yeah, I mean, we can discuss this. I've been on many nonprofit boards, and it's money in the community. Yeah. Other nonprofits raise funds to, you know, they get donors and things like this. So this is not like, you know, maybe we're Charlottesville, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, snow removal and cutting the grass. They don't have a big yard, you know, for that. You can, you know,
so you think including it is fair?
Yeah, that's what I have proposed, but, you know, so. Was there any other discussion from the public for the public hearing?
No, we already closed the public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, I just will say in general that I agree with Mr. Payne in terms of we just should be upfront with the fact that, you know, this is a subsidy, and it's because we care for these common spaces that y'all are helping us maintain in your own ways. And so there is a value, even if it's not monetary. I think, you know, the difficulty is, you know, with the next, like you said, who else might go into a space like that, and you know, how would we evaluate competitors, as it were, or alternatives? But I think that's beyond our scope tonight.
And I think the other strangeness of trying to evaluate the worth is that the subsidy is also about not just the nonprofit, but in this particular case, like a publicly available space that is sort of like a park. I mean, anyone can go up there without paying money and see art, do First Fridays, other events. So you also have that kind of non-tangible value from it as well. But
well, so I guess we're to the point where the only point of disagreement for tonight, or the only thing requiring further action, is to nail down this language about what's going to happen. I mean, I guess maybe you all are saying you don't want to shift that cost at all. I don't know. What's the sense of where you're going with this?
I think there's 2 of us. It sounds like who'd be happy to just let it float like it has been, but I think there are probably 3 of us that think we should need some more precision on the numbers and perhaps require McGuffey to pay for it.
Yeah. And I think that one proposal was to let it go like it is this year, to give staff time to really come up with a true estimate. And I don't think that it would be putting a lot of pressure on staff to do it, and even in a couple of weeks, that's my opinion. But
if I may, that's the proposal that would be preferred operationally. As I'm thinking about this, there are operational implications. I mean, we're having a hard time in some cases in filling positions in public works and to maintain our facilities, and I'm concerned about the strain that places on the facilities that we occupy. So I'd like to take a look at this in both in terms of balancing manpower and the implications. So, maybe it's not a big deal in terms of the snow. Maybe we only get 1 or 2 snows a year. Maybe that's okay. But the landscaping is a whole different question that I'd like to look at with Public Works and see how we can do this. And I think evaluating that over the next year with and coming back with the language in a couple of weeks, whenever, would be a better way to approach it.
So in 2 weeks, we would vote on something?
Yes.
Okay.
And basically, we would just vote that the language would be adjusted, that when it comes to maintenance, we extend what the status quo is for a year.
Right.
I'm open to that. I share Councilor Pinkston's perspective, but if others disagree, I'm open to moving forward.
I guess my only, I know we need to move on.
I see Mr. Sanders has just jumped on. Do you have any comment there?
I was only just, Mr. Rogers got what I said. I was basically wanting to say to you that we can have the information in 2 weeks. That is not a concern for staff to figure out because they had already started the work. So we could bring back to you more information for the next meeting and hold another public hearing if necessary.
All right, yeah. I say let's do that. Yeah.
Okay. So we will defer it until next meeting with attention really just on that one issue. And why don't we put it on the consent agenda, and if people have difficulties with what is there, we can take it off the consent agenda. Sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
And we
All
didn't
right.
need a public hearing? Like
We do
legally?
not need another public hearing.
Legally, okay.
Yeah, is what I'm understanding. Okay. I think we're very, very close to having it all nailed down. Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, number 10 on the agenda, is to establish days, times, and places of the meetings of the Charlottesville City Council during calendar year 2023. The only real issue that we've got is the question of what do we do about July 3rd. The last few years, we have simply canceled that meeting. Clearly, we wouldn't have it on the 3rd or the 4th. And if we just canceled it and gave everybody a holiday at the beginning of July, historically, Charlottesville doesn't accomplish much in the month of July anyway, so that sound reasonable to folks?
Yep.
Yeah, it's one of the things I brought up in my meeting because I was like, wait a second, I think we normally take this meeting off, and
Yeah.
so I was going to bring up
Yeah.
that we amend this.
Other than that, the dates that are set forth, everybody okay with?
Yep. Yep.
Yes,
put 'em in my
confused.
calendar.
You don't have to just take one break.
Beg your pardon?
So you don't have to just take one break. It's true.
Let's do one meeting every 6 months.
Okay. Are there,
Just saying.
the note that I have here is what dates to take a summer break, and that would certainly be for the first week in July, and any other meeting dates to remove from the regular meeting schedule. There is often some change around the holidays, November and December. The only real relevance there, November 20th is, of course, 3 days before Thanksgiving. November 18th is a week before Christmas. We have October 16th. That's not a holiday, I guess.
I think the schedule looks good. There's a note in here about possibly only having one meeting in months with major holidays, such as November and December. But we need those dates.
I think so.
We need
And I'll
4
also
solid
say,
meetings at least at the end of the year.
historically, particularly November and December of every other year when certain councilors are rotating off, there's a push to try to get a bunch of things done, and those meetings would get pretty darn crowded if we didn't have them all. So, all right, is there a motion to approve this?
This is just a thought, and I'm just finishing my first year, so I don't know if it's possible, but if there is if we advertise this and there's a meeting, let's say, I'm just going to say the second meeting in May, there's only 1 or 2 items that's not time sensitive, and the city manager say, you know what, we probably can do that at the first May meeting or June meeting. Can that meeting be canceled?
Yes.
Yeah,
can
we
be.
did that one year. It was around Christmas time. We canceled either it was around Christmas or the 1st of January meeting. We canceled that year.
Notice.
So you can with notice. So and
We've never been in a place that we could do
we
that.
do that. So I'm figuring that out. I'm figuring that out. But Mr. City Manager, if there are opportunities out there as you're doing it, if you see that, you know what, it's a pretty light agenda, we can move it, or then feel free to do so.
Yeah, consolidate. Yeah.
Just saying.
Okay.
So do you need a motion?
We need a motion and a second to approve the calendar that's been set out here minus July 3rd.
Okay.
I move to approve the calendar that has been set out here minus July 3rd.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Thomas, will you take the vote, please?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, passes 5-0. Good. Next, resolution adopting the amendment and reenactment of November 15th, 2021 comp plan for City of Charlottesville as amended. Mr. Freeze?
All right. Good evening, Mayor Snook and members of council. The item before you this evening is an amendment to the comprehensive plan. There's substantively 2 items. In fact, the adoption of the climate action plan and amendments supporting manufactured housing as a form of affordable housing. This second item addresses a requirement in state law that the comprehensive plan must consider manufactured housing. Public hearing was held on December 13th, and both staff and the Planning Commission have recommended approval of the 2 proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan. I have with me here this evening Crystal Rudevold from DPW, the Environmental Sustainability Manager, and Missy Creasy, Deputy Director of Neighborhood Development Services. We are all available to answer any questions you may have on these amendments.
Anybody have any questions?
No.
Nope.
Substantively 2 items. In fact,
No.
Okay, we're getting a little feedback or looping. Okay, so we have no questions for Mr. Freeze on this. Councilors, do we have agreement to move this item to the next meeting for the second reading on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, done. January 17th. Okay, Mr. Freeze, stay with us because we're now discussing the next item, initiating a zoning text amendment to change the PUD ordinance.
Thank you. Good evening again. So this proposed zoning text amendment was submitted on behalf of RMD Properties and seeks to reduce the minimum lot size for a PUD, for planned unit development, within the urban corridor zoning district. RMD is seeking the zoning amendment in order to essentially create a pathway for their proposed development at 2117 Ivy Road. Now, I want to be clear that this pathway has many steps in it. The action tonight is in no way an approval of the project, but if council were to approve the resolution before you this evening, it sends this item, the zoning amendment proposal, to the Planning Commission for their consideration and for a public hearing, and then it would come back to City Council for decision. And then ultimately, for the project to move forward as proposed, it would then require a rezoning to the PUD district. Staff is supporting this resolution to consider a text change at this time, primarily because the project, as proposed, has the potential to hit on a number of the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, particularly those relating to housing. But that said, staff will be doing an analysis to understand the full implications of this proposed change and reserves the right to develop a recommendation on the proposed amendment independently of the recommendation here this evening. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
So my main question, I guess, is, I mean, I understand that it apparently is important to a particular project, but putting aside the particular project, why is this a good idea?
I think, first, our recommendation is really more tied to the fact that there is a proposal in front of us. Broadly speaking, I would say that while we do have a rewrite of the zoning ordinance in front of us, we have that rewrite, there's no guarantees. We anticipate and we certainly hope that we'll be able to move forward in a timely manner with that zoning ordinance amendment. But in the meantime, PUDs do offer an opportunity for a more flexible approach to zoning that could be consistent with our efforts under the comprehensive plan. And this particular district, with its proximity to the university and good transportation infrastructure, is a good place to be considering those types of developments supported by the comprehensive plan. That area, that zoning district itself, is described as a transition type district. That district, I think, invites the opportunity for more flexible development options.
I mean, is there some philosophical reason or some reason in law or prior practice why 2 acres is sort of the cutoff, and we don't typically endorse having a PUD below 2 acres?
I don't know that there's anything in particular in practice. I do, and it's noted in the staff report that there was an amendment to the zoning ordinance to increase the minimum acreage for a PUD to 2 acres a number of years ago. I believe that was in 2008. Generally speaking, the purpose of a PUD district is to promote innovative development projects. And I suspect the theory there is that you need a certain amount of land area in order to accomplish that.
And this is simply recognizing that creativity and innovation can occur on smaller lots as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm generally supportive of this. Again, so we've gotten emails and we had a comment tonight about, well, let's just go ahead and do this across the board and not just seek a zoning amendment for this particular parcel. At this point, we're just talking about this particular parcel. Is it the case that once, we get to the promised land, so to speak, of a zoning a comp plan that we've finally adopted, and this zoning rewrite that's occurring, the idea would be when we get to that ideal future state, we won't even have to worry about PUDs and all of this really becomes moot. Is that the idea?
Right now, it's our intention to not include a PUD section in the new zoning ordinance. Again, PUDs are meant to promote flexible standards for development. We believe that the new zoning ordinance will be set up to offer the necessary level of flexibility kind of within a set of bounds that accomplish the goals of the comprehensive plan sufficiently that we don't need a PUD district anymore.
Okay. So what we're, again, looking at tonight would be just for this specific parcel, and it sounds like...
Now, to be clear, this amendment to the text would be in effect for all parcels within the zoning district that's identified.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, but there will still be a chance to look at this project down the road. The planning commission won't have to see it.
There's no decision being made this evening as far as actually approving this amendment to the zoning ordinance or for that matter, approving the project. It would still need to go to the planning commission for consideration and a public hearing jointly with city council to dig in and kind of understand the implications of the proposed amendment as proposed. And then you would still need the rezoning to the PUD district for the particular project.
Okay. I'm planning to vote for it, so.
So is there any other discussion of it, or are we ready for a motion? Want to make a motion, Mr. Pinkston?
Yes, I will do that. I move the resolution initiating an amendment to the zoning text within section 34-492 of the city code.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just note, we all know this, but I would just note for the public, I myself, and I imagine all of us, have a lot of outstanding questions about the specific project, as well as the implications for a change in
Like we don't know anything
an
about
entire
it.
zoning district. But this is obviously not us making a final decision, and is us just really getting more information, having more discussion. So that's why I'm in support of it.
Allowing the planning commission to start looking at it.
Right.
Because this is the first step to even allowing them to look at this situation.
Right. Okay. Ms. Thomas, take the vote.
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, passes 5-0. Next item up, thank you, Mr. Freeze, extending the dockless mobility sharing system permit for VO Ride, Inc. Ben Chambers to present. Mr. Chambers?
Hi, good evening. I'm Ben Chambers. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager for the city. The item that you have before you is a resolution that would extend the 2022 dockless mobility sharing system permit to VEO Ride for 90 days. That would put it to about March 31st, 2023. This dockless mobility permit is how we manage the for-profit scooter and bike share programs around the city. It's been around since 2019. Over the years, we've had multiple operators holding this permit. Currently, VEO is the only one holding this permit. In 2019, they approached us about renegotiating some of the terms around the permit. They're looking to restructure fees, be able to change fleet size restrictions, better align what our program is doing with what some of our peer cities are doing. And in order to have that discussion and continue discussions with VEO, had requested a limited extension under the current terms of the city's permit program. The key incentive for the city to grant this 90-day extension and continue discussions with VEO is that this provides us some time to figure out how we can address the community feedback that we've heard about this program, particularly around parking, ADA issues, and safety.
Amen.
This 90-day extension will allow us to come up with a plan for addressing those concerns with VEO as a team. It will help us develop recommendations for the permit program so that we can hold VEO accountable for that plan that we're developing to address parking and safety. And it'll also give us some time to hire a bike ped coordinator who would be the one managing both the permit program and soliciting additional community feedback so that we could continue to improve the program. Staff is recommending approval of the 90-day extension of VEO's permit. I'm willing to address any questions you might have on the dockless mobility permit in general or on this specific extension.
A 90-day extension suggests that by the first meeting in March, roughly, we'll have all this figured out. Is that doable?
Yeah, I think it's doable. A lot of what we're looking at with the parking issue has actually been addressed at UVA. They use the exact same vendor that we use as sort of an extension, but they have done a lot of work looking into how they can address sort of the issues with parking and ADA access on grounds. So we're hoping to extend some of what they're doing and then also look to see if there's any other improvements that we can add to the system. And I think that's doable within 3 months.
Yeah, so just to be clear that the issues is not just of parking, is not just on UVA grounds. I'm not sure if I understood what you were saying, that it's, I'm not on grounds too much, so I'm sure it may be there too, but I see it on Main Street, I see it on
Yeah.
Cherry Avenue, that's, okay.
Yeah, the issues that we're seeing most are on the Main Street corridor, not necessarily on UVA grounds. UVA seems to have a good handle on how they want their system organized. We see a lot of issues on Main Street because that's where a lot of the heaviest traffic is for our scooter system. But we also see them off Main Street where, you know, sometimes scooter gets sort of left somewhere and doesn't get moved very frequently. So those are the sorts of issues that we're going to have to tackle with VAO.
So I'm just curious, are they still like tossed in creeks and railroad tracks and, you know, the side of hills and things?
Yeah, we do still see some interesting places where they pop up. I will say that. But we do have a local operations team that goes out and picks those things up and returns them to where they should be.
Yeah, I guess the first thing is I want to say welcome, Mr. Chambers.
Yeah,
thank you.
Glad to have you on board. I know there's lots of work that you've already been tasked to, and we're glad that you're here. You know, my general opinion of these things is that they're terrible because they're always in the way, and they're a safety hazard, and most people aren't wearing helmets, and they're in the way of sidewalks, and that does happen. I work at UVA. That's still an issue over there too. So, but as I've spoken with people, there are many people that this has sort of become an integral part of how they get around, and also being on the RTP, the Regional Transit Partnership, I've come to have sort of a grudging appreciation that we need something like this, some sort of service like this. So, I do hope in the next 90 days y'all can sort of, cut the Gordian knot on how to make this work, where people in wheelchairs aren't having to negotiate one of these lying in the way. I always wondered if there's like a way to impose a fee or something on the user if they just drop it in a sidewalk. But I'm happy to vote for this.
Okay. Do we have any other questions, or are we ready for a motion?
I move that we approve the continuation for the next 90 days.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion?
It seems pretty straightforward to me.
Okay. Ms. Thomas?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 5-0. Next item, expressing support for the TJPDC allocation plan for Home American Rescue Plan funding. Mr. Ikefuna?
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors, City Manager. What you have before you this evening is expression of support for Home ARP, American Rescue Plan, from HUD that was granted to Thomas Jefferson PDC in 2021. Staff is recommending that the City Council approve staff report authorizing Thomas Jefferson PDC to transmit the allocation plan, which will spell out what each member jurisdiction is getting and potentially what they're looking at using the funding for once the allocation plan is approved by HUD. And secondly, we're going to come back to the City Council again when the allocation plan is approved. During that return to the City Council, we would have completed the request for proposal to submit for potential contractors to submit or developers to submit their proposal to the city for review. And then subsequent after that, we'll make a recommendation to the City Council for approval. And then implementation will begin at that point. And I just want to point out that a representative from Thomas Jefferson PDC is here with us, Mr. Baxter. So if you have any question for both of us, we'll be glad to answer the question. The city will be receiving about $347,000 plus a few change as part of its share of the $2.45 million.
Okay. And of course, this is not saying how we're going to spend it, simply saying we approve of the plan that would get that money to us.
Exactly.
Okay.
What you are approving right now will help Thomas Jefferson PDC to complete the allocation plan, which every jurisdiction and Regional Planning Commission in the United States is doing at this point.
Right. Okay. Council, any questions?
I guess I was just very confused by expressing support for the TJPDC allocation plan for home when we don't have the plan yet.
The plan is that we get $347,404.92.
Exactly. And it breaks down.
And what is, I guess, what is why are we determined to get that amount?
Because the city is part of a consortium, which is Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, and the Home Fund, whether it's annual entitlement or any special home allocation from HUD, goes to Thomas Jefferson PDC. The city administers the CDBG, but the home goes to the Thomas Jefferson PDC, and then they divide it equally among the member jurisdictions, which includes the city, Albemarle County, Louisa, Greene, Nelson, and Fluvanna counties.
But what is the formula to divide it?
I think it's divided on equal basis, pretty much.
I think it's a federal formula, correct?
It's a federal formula, yeah. It goes to the consortium and then it's divided on equal basis. The amount of money we are getting for the home fund is the same amount that Fluvanna is going to get, Nelson, Greene, Albemarle County, and then Thomas Jefferson PDC gets, I believe, 10% of the funding for administration because they're going to be responsible for administering the program, providing the necessary reports to the federal government, and then closing out all the projects and then reporting back to HUD.
So
what we're being asked to do here is support the transmission of the TJPDC's allocation plan to HUD for approval.
Right.
Yeah, there is a resolution attached to the staff report.
And I'll just say I'm on the Planning District Commission, and we've discussed and had this item before us, and I have no issues with it, just that I plan to vote in support of it.
So you want to make that a motion?
Sure. I would move to approve a resolution expressing council support for the TJPDC allocation plan for Home American Rescue Plan ARP funding.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
So if 10% goes to TJPDC, and then it's divided equally amongst 6 people, we should be getting $20,000 more.
We are not. The 10% goes to Thomas Jefferson PDC. The admin is for administration.
Okay.
Yeah, it's for administration of the project. But what we are going to get as equal partner is $347,000.
So 10% of $2,452,270 is $408,711.67. Subtract that, and then that number, and then divide it by 6. It gives us we should be getting $367,000.
I can answer that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, councilors, if we could allow Mr. Baxter to explain, there's more information in regards to the expenditures for TJPDC.
Yeah. Hey, good evening, Council. Yeah, that total that you're looking at, Councilor McGill, has already had the 10% taken out of it, or the 367,000-ish that the TJPDC will be receiving. So that's why that figure is lower than what you're getting.
Okay, so this is why I wish we had been submitted, like, how this was figured out as well, besides just given there. So if you take 2,452,270 times 0.1 is 245,227. So again, you take the original number, 0, minus 245,227 equals 2,207,043 divided by 6 equals $367,840.50.
So what's missing from the calculation, Councilor McGill, is that there is also an additional 5% that TJPDC also gets to retain for planning services. That's another $122,613, which is the source of your difference.
Thank you. And when we're receiving these, it would be really nice to have those as well, so we know what the formula is being awarded and how it's being broken down. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to go on this then? Do we have a motion and a second already?
Yes.
Yeah, we do.
We were
Okay.
just doing discussion.
Right, okay. Ms. Thomas, you want to take the vote?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Now we come back to the two items that were taken off the consent agenda, the first one of which had been number 5, is the resolution of appropriation to amend fiscal year 2023 budget, second reading.
Well, yeah, we could just try to get this over with quickly and I know we've emailed about it and discussed it. As I said last council meeting in an email follow-up this weekend, I would continue to advocate making an adjustment for the $1 million allocated for a city manager strategic investment fund to instead go to a land acquisition fund in anticipation of numerous opportunities, not just for the housing authority and housing more generally, but also some other property acquisitions we know are going to be opportunities available to us. Even with that adjustment, it won't be sufficient to take advantage of those opportunities. I think we'll need to use unallocated ARPA money as well, but I think it's necessary as a down payment to make those opportunities available. I think I've discussed at length, everybody, my rationale for doing it, so I would just say I would propose that as an amendment if any others agree. See if any others agree.
So, Councilor Payne, that's the only item you're talking about modifying?
Correct.
Well, this is just a point of clarity because I am supportive of this, but we already voted a while ago on that part.
No, ARPA allocations had other, there was a strategic investment fund, but this ARPA allocation, item J, a city manager fund, is $1 million for this year in surplus allocation.
But we voted on part of the year in surplus already, or did we just give direction? We had that whole presentation.
We moved it to the consent agenda tonight. And then we just moved it for further
You've had the
discussion.
first reading and the public hearing on this item.
Okay, because I just remember back in like November, we were also talking about this. We had the whole presentation and about when we thought that the amount was, we knew it was going to be more, but we weren't sure how much more. but we felt comfortable giving direction on the surplus that we knew was coming.
Yeah, so I can add into that. We actually discussed that as part of the budget development back in April, but
Right.
it wasn't actually a formal vote because the surplus had not materialized at that point. So the first meeting last week would be the first official action that would have been addressed regarding that. So anything prior to last week is really just discussion.
Okay, just wanted to clarify on that, so thank you.
So, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say I'm in support of that.
Well, I'm not sure I understand exactly what Mr. Payne is suggesting, except that I know that he's talking about taking away the $1 million city manager fund, and just so that's everybody's clear on that, I had suggested that largely as a way of saying to potential city manager candidates, if you come and you've got things you want to accomplish, we're telling you we've set aside some money for you to be able to do that, obviously subject to council's approval, but they don't have to feel like they're coming into a situation where it's going to be at least a year before they can start doing anything that they particularly want to do. That was my reason for having recommended the $1 million city manager fund in the first place. The discussions about land banking and things that might possibly be done, I thought were more than adequately taken care of by the fact that we've allocated $6.6 million to the capital contingency fund, which is, in a sense, unspent money that is available for another capital project if a capital project comes along.
And my rationale is that I think if we're looking at the next 6 months to year, I don't think we will have sufficient money to take advantage of maybe even one, certainly not 1 to 3 of the opportunities I outlined in the email. For example, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just as one example, the bypass fire station's cost has already gone up by over $1 million that we haven't yet adjusted in our budget. So boom, that's $1 million of the contingency fund gone. And I imagine that's going to get eaten up pretty quickly with inflation cost increases for every CIP project. But in addition, some of the opportunities I outlined with housing, some of the other ones we've discussed in closed session are several $1 million. So.
What was the least expensive one that you outlined? It was like $10 million, right?
Well,
that would require $5 million in addition to other funds.
Yes, and there was also a list of properties that the Housing Authority has identified that are for sale that they would be interested in acquiring, similar to how they used the SISRAP money to acquire a few properties. There are 12 units that they've identified as a top priority that would be about $1.8 million to acquire in Orangedale and King Street, I believe, are the location of those units. But they have a large list of units they could acquire if they had funding to do so. That would be on a smaller scale compared to buying a portfolio of units.
And this, I don't know, this maybe is a really simplistic approach, but I see the mayor's point in having some money to attract a city manager, or new city managers, and in the strategic, how that could be strategic and possibly transformative for the organization, for a person to come in and use that money, wisely, but it could be a force multiplier to use that sort of metaphor. To have a certain amount of money to start off with. On the other hand, I think we need to take advantage of the things that you've mentioned, Mr. Payne. Would it be, if we just divided it in half, would that be a suitable compromise? $1 million is kind of a lot of money in my mind to give a new person coming in, but $500,000.
Well, I mean, I still think when we look at the dollar amounts of the opportunities in front of us, that it's going to be harder to get there than not. So the more money helps us out. Obviously, I would think dividing it in half is preferable to where we're at right now. I would still allocate for transferring all of it, but
I've been a big proponent of a land bank for a long time. I believe it's also mentioned in our affordable housing plan as an important tool to assure our affordable housing goals. And it can be set up in a lot of different ways, but the problem is a lot of nonprofits who might come across an opportunity won't have the time to raise the money that they need to raise necessarily when something comes available. So part of an idea of a land bank too isn't necessarily that it's given to the nonprofit, but it's lent to them until they can then raise the money. There's different models, but I think even saying that we are starting one sends an intent that we want to continue this and be part of this.
Yeah, and I don't disagree at all. I still see the mayor's point that maybe it's 250,000. I don't know what is a good number. Maybe Ms. Hardy could help us with what would help with recruitment. But I do think that a certain amount of money could be transformative. It could be it could help us in recruiting a person and also giving them some leeway in their first year to really make an impact.
Yeah, and I guess, and I don't disagree. I guess, as I've said, my concern is just we don't know what kind of tangible priorities would be invested in with that target amount, and there's no clear basis on which we landed at $1 million. And I understand in an area like this, it's not like you have an offer or an assessment on something where you can have a concrete number, but.
And I guess my concern, as I said in the email this afternoon, is you're basically trying to save money for something that we haven't identified yet. We think we might, sometime in the next year or 2 or 3, have some use for some money with no plan. And what I'm proposing is well, I guess if we're only talking about the $1 million, $1 million isn't going to buy any of those housing projects you want to build.
No, but it's a down payment on getting closer to do there. And I think if you look at, for example, the program for Fairfax that I sent around, where they've purchased units, as well as in a different context, economic development, for example, in Danville, they built up buckets of money over a period of several years in order to acquire most of the property along their riverfront, which the city owned, to create a revitalization plan. They needed to have the city purchase land to do something very strategic and big. They couldn't do it all at once, but they built it up and got there. And I mean, the city manager's fund is also unallocated and unspecified. And in our ARPA allocation, we also sent $1 million to a strategic investment fund, which is also undefined for flexible opportunities coming forward. But in any case, I know we've kind of gone back and forth with this. It comes down to, it sounds like, Lloyd, you're against any adjustment. Brian, you're maybe open to an adjustment of 500,000. Sino's open to $1 million. Where are you at, Juan?
I'm at 500. And what I was going to say is that, if we decide to do something today or not, I can anticipate, just from my time on the council for the 1 year I have been, that at some point in the future we're going to get approached in a somewhat panicked situation because something has come up that we need to purchase to save some affordable housing from going into the regular market, if you will. And we just need to be prepared, whether it's today or whatever we want to call it. We just should be prepared to be able to assist whatever nonprofit, whether it's PHA, the Housing Authority, what have you, to be able to assist them if you want to keep 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever number of units into affordable housing. So I'm not sure where we get it from, or I have some ideas, or what amount, because.
Yeah, the way I'm thinking about it is I think that there's validity in the mayor's suggestion of having some sort of fund for a new person coming on. And I also think that I think $1 million is too much money. What is my basis for saying that? I don't know, just rule of thumb and watching the numbers that have come across here in the year I've been here. I think $500,000 is would be a great starter for a new city manager to make a difference, make an impact. What would I do with the other money? Well, it sounds like you've got a really good idea of what we could do with that other money. I have not heard any other better ideas. So for me, I would like to see something fleshed out. If we take $500,000, I guess basically, essentially moving it over to the CIP really is what we're doing with it. In contingencies, really, that's only unless we create a line item, I suppose.
Well, I suppose just seeing where people at there, I would propose an amendment to the resolution of appropriation to amend the fiscal year 2023 budget to reallocate $500,000 in the city manager's fund, earmarked for land acquisition, I guess. I'm open to whether that goes to the contingency fund or whether like the strategic investment fund. It's labeled that way. I don't know. I guess
Did you say two separate, $500,000 for city manager?
Taking $500,000 out of city manager and putting into this.
Got it. Yeah. Got it. Sorry. Deductive.
And then let me say, one of the points I mentioned earlier is that if we're talking about buying land and buying more housing units that are already built and so on, I mean, scattered site housing has been a thing for a long time, and we have not done it very well. We also don't have any plan to do it. CRHA has not come to us and has not said to us, we want to do this. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to administer it.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is the time in which I'm sure that Mr. Sales has been thinking about it. Maybe we say, look, this is a down payment.
I've definitely been thinking about it.
To get that vision going and a plan laid out accordingly.
I mean, if we say to Mr. Sales, if you've got these ideas of things you want to be buying, make us a proposal. Figure this thing out of how you're going to do it, what you're going to do, what your standards are going to be. As I mentioned, at least one little issue arising about who gets to rent some of these properties, and let's talk about it. And if we end up saying, okay, there's $500,000 that we're not spending any other place, that's not the same thing as saying we're giving you $500,000. It's saying we're just not spending it any other place.
Well, and it doesn't even necessarily say it's CRHA.
I understand.
It's saying.
But every proposal has been for CRHA.
True.
Well, so.
But community services housing, let's say they came forward and asked.
Well, and just to clarify, to resolve it, I know we have to get onto our most thrilling topic, the critical slope waiver. But
it's a critical one for sure.
Again, I would propose an amendment to the resolution of appropriation to amend the fiscal year 2023 budget to adjust $500,000 currently allocated to the city manager's fund to go to a land acquisition fund. I don't know if there is a second or any support for that.
Second, yeah.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second, we've discussed it probably more than we need to. Ms. Thomas, you want to take the vote?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
No.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, so it passes 4-1. With that, I guess that was one change, but I still didn't hear that as being a vote on the entire package.
Correct.
So was that
as amended? Do we want to vote on the entire resolution?
I'm prepared to do that. I would move to approve the resolution of appropriation to amend the fiscal year 2023 budget as amended.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Thomas?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, so that passes 5-0. All right. Thank you, Mr. Cullinan. Thank you, Ms. Hamill. And the last item on the agenda is the critical slope waiver request for the Azalea Springs subdivision.
Welcome in person.
I know. I haven't been in here in 3 years. So I thought I would take the opportunity.
As beautiful as you remembered it?
It is everything I remember. Mayor, City Council, Matt Alfley, City Planner, Neighborhood Development Services. City Council, tonight you'll be taking up Planning Commission's recommendation on a critical slope waiver application for proposed development referred to as Azalea Springs. The property within the development are located between Azalea Drive and Monte Vista Avenue. Access to the development is through an existing stub-out section of right-of-way off Azalea Drive. The properties are owned by Stanley Martin Companies, LLC, and they are proposing to develop 45 single-family detached dwellings on the site, along with 0.6 acres of community open space and supporting infrastructure, and the preservation of approximately 77 trees. On December 13, 2022, Planning Commission held a discussion related to this waiver request and voted 6-0 to recommend approval of the application to City Council. Prior to your discussion this evening, I would like Council to keep the following in mind. The proposed development site was platted in roughly 1919, and the lots are legal non-conforming lots of record. The status gives this lots vested rights when it comes to land use and development. Per section 341145A, the lots may be developed as platted per all permitted uses found in section 34420, including single-family detached dwellings, which is what is being proposed. Tax map parcels are not platted lots. This comes up a lot throughout the city, but never at this scale. Tax map parcels are maps created by the city assessor's office to collect tax revenue, and they are not subdivision lots. Most of the time, this is not an issue, as tax map parcels overlay and match the platted lots of record. Legal platted lots are created through the subdivision or combining of physical land performed by a licensed surveyor and recorded by the circuit court. As platted, approximately 22 of the 88-plus lots contain critical slopes and do not have a buildable area outside of these slopes. But per section 341120B7B, the platted lots from 1919 are exempt from critical slope regulations as they are lawful lots of record prior to the adoption of the critical slope ordinance. Because the applicant is choosing to alter the boundaries of the legal lots of record, which they are permitted to do under section 341145B, they will lose this exemption under the critical slope regulations. They are doing this to increase the size of the platted right-of-ways to accommodate a city standard street. If in the future the city was to update their street standards to allow more narrow streets, it is conceivable that the lots could be developed without altering the layout, which would preserve their exemption status. Although this is being presented as one development, the critical slope waiver is only needed for approximately 22 lots. The vast majority of the site can be developed by right with only ministerial review from a land use and zoning standpoint. This is not taking into consideration the constructability of the lots, things like utility, construction, sewer, street standards. You can see the staff report to Planning Commission for more detail on that. As just stated, from a zoning and land use perspective, the majority of the site can be developed by right. This includes removal of most trees on the site because they are not within the critical slope area. If the approximate 22 lots that contain critical slopes are protected, the critical slope waiver is denied by City Council. That will result in the preservation of approximately 40 trees. This would represent 43% decrease in tree preservation that is being proposed by the applicant. In most cases, staff does not do a hypothetical comparison between what is being proposed and what could be proposed. But it's kind of interesting, the last two critical slope waivers that have come before you, think Belmont condos, which was your last critical slope waiver you looked at. Prior to that waiver, the applicant had actually worked through a site plan for a plan that would not disturb critical slopes. So there was a chance to kind of look at the site if you disturb critical slopes, if you didn't, because there were two plans. Most of the time that doesn't happen. Most of the time it's in one big lot, there's a proposal that disturbs critical slopes. We don't do a hypothetical, we just do the analysis before us. With this one too, you have a proposal, but you do have a reasonable assumption. These are legal lots of record, there are right-of-ways there. This is not a develop versus not develop. There are development rights that go with each of these individual 1919 platted lots that could be developed outside of the critical slope. So as you're discussing this tonight, I just don't want you to keep that in mind. There's a lot of talk about canopy loss, which is something to consider, but a lot of those trees are outside of critical slopes and you could lose those trees. They would be replaced by our 20% requirement, but they could be developed just by right as not affecting critical slope. With that, that closes my presentation. I'm here to answer questions. The applicant is here. They don't have a formal presentation, but they can answer questions also.
Okay. Council have any questions for the staff?
Yes. So it's interesting. So this was, do you know if this entire space that's being developed, all of these lots that were platted in 1919, these were all purchased at the same time, I guess, by this developer?
Yes. So this site does have a history. Prior to this development, there was a proposal to develop it that was pursuing a private sanitary pump station. That was a special use, needed a special use. It went through Planning Commission, had a recommendation of denial, never came before City Council. It was withdrawn from the applicant before it came forward. That landowner sold the lot, or lots, to Stanley Martin, and they put together a different proposal to come forward, one that would have gravity-fed sewer feed into the city's existing sanitary system without having to have a private pump station.
So if we were to deny the critical slopes waiver for the 22 lots, you said?
Approximately 22 are what have critical slopes on them, yes.
So 22 lots out of how many?
Roughly 88 plus.
Okay, so
it's actually around 116 that are legal lots of record.
Okay, so roughly maybe a fifth of the area we could deny the critical slopes. And I'm just thinking on a real macro level, roughly a fifth of the area is what we're talking about, that we could deny the critical slopes waiver. Maybe not, it may not be one for one when you're looking at it in the field, I don't know, but.
So, yes, you could. City Council could deny the waiver. I just want you to think as you're debating that this isn't just a one parcel. These are lots of parcels. So it doesn't, by denying the waiver, there's still development rights. A development could still go in at this location. You still get quite a few homes.
Okay.
That's the other thing. Stepping back in time, this issue with these small lots was all over. So back when most of the city was platted, it comes up in the residential districts a lot. You have these 25-foot lots platted 1890s up to 1920s. Somebody would go in and buy maybe 2 or 3 of these 25-foot lots, build their home across the property line, never thought about it. We run into it a lot, but usually it's one lot at a time. Somebody will come in and say, I have a lot. It was never joined. It shows the tax map record as one lot, but when you look at it, it was never joined, so it's legally 2 lots of record sitting there, but it has a house sitting across the property line.
So you probably, you may not have any way of sort of helping us with a hypothetical that if we were to reject this, what impact that would have on the overall development of the area.
It's not so much a hypothetical. It's hard to say because it would mean if somebody wanted to build small shotgun-style houses on 25-foot lots, 5-foot side setbacks, which is the requirement. Now, is that feasible? Would someone do that, or would they join some of the lots? I can give you the numbers as far as if you denied the critical slope, that leaves roughly 22 lots you couldn't build on. That leaves roughly 66 lots you could. I'm not saying a developer would build on those 66. They might combine them so they could build a larger house for each lot. But you would have, at least from a land use standpoint, you have still 66 plus valid lots that could be built on that do not need a critical slope waiver.
Did you say 88 total or 120 total?
So 88, we're saying 88 plus because the plat I have has 116.
Okay.
But the original application that came in said 88. There's kind of a discrepancy, but we're saying 88 plus because it's
Okay.
somewhere between 88 and 116.
Okay. And if I may jump in just quickly, you mentioned if they weren't approved, there would be those 66 developable lots. You had mentioned earlier a question that does not touch around the question of infrastructure needs in terms of how you would install utilities, other things like that. I presume that's something in the analysis on the city's end that you're just not really able to get into and seek to. Because I guess the relevant question, or a relevant question is, 66 lots could be developable by right, but does the cost of the project, if you need to install utilities or something else a certain way, go up so much that it becomes realistically unfeasible?
And that's definitely something I think you can ask the applicant's engineer. So what I am speaking is just to land use and zoning, because that is the constructability side. So I can say, yes, if you denied it, there are still 66 plus lots that could be developed that would not impact critical slopes. Is that constructible? That I can't answer.
Yeah. And presumably they'd have to do the same sort of analysis like happened over at Belmont in terms of, okay, if we can't build on these spaces, then how do we adjust our development?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for Belmont, it was like, well, that's basically just a huge industrial junkyard. It was a pretty easy decision to make. In this case, it's, some of the oldest woods in the city. So it's a very different calculation in my mind.
Yes, that was definitely more of a man-made critical slope. I was bringing up Belmont just for to articulate that there was a design done. So we rarely get this look at, okay, if we do critical slope versus not,
right?
Because a developer usually doesn't go to this extent of engineering out that design.
Right, because it'd be a lot of money for them to do that. Yeah.
Just one question for you is I believe the Tree Commission sent us an analysis done by Pitchford and Associates, which argued that the amount of tree canopy loss would be at least 6 times greater than what was presented by the applicant. Is that something that city staff has been able to look at or can verify in any way?
So we haven't looked at that too much, kind of for 2 reasons. I'm a little leery. I have not talked to the applicant whether that arborist, had permission to enter their land. It is private land. The other side being, we don't have a tree canopy loss calculation in the code. We have a tree canopy addition. So in the code, when you develop a site, you have to provide a certain amount of tree canopy. For this, it would be 20%. And that's regardless of how much tree canopy you take. Now, if you preserve trees, there is a calculation that you can count that towards what canopy you have to provide at the end of the day. But we don't look at removal of canopy. We just look at what your canopy is post-development.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
So I think that, and maybe I'm just being too elementary with this, but I think that there's going to be a perception that if we deny this critical slope waiver, then the project will go away. I think that, at least from some of the emails that I received, that may be the perception, but in reality is that, like Michael and Brian said, that they may still be able to maybe do 66 plus units, probably, have to look at what the impact will be, because it still has to be the road that they have to build for it. So, it's a difficult one. I mean, because we want more housing options, and but I don't have any questions. I'm just still kind of trying to decide what this one will look like.
Yeah, well, most of the time, my bias, maybe that's not the right term to use, but my inclination is going to be more housing, and we've demonstrated it, in another development over on Stribling Avenue in the same neighborhood. So it's not like we haven't been stuffing housing into Fry Springs. We have. I don't really know much about the project per se, if it's getting us any affordable housing or, super density, or these really large houses that are going up in places with like 4 people living in them. For me, what I'm thinking about is simply the fact of that tree canopy in that particular area. I think that it's a unique space in Charlottesville, and I think it needs to be preserved. So I'm going to vote against the waiver.
And I'll say my thinking at this point is similar in that when I look at the proposal, it doesn't seem particularly creative in terms of tree preservation. It doesn't match our draft inclusionary zoning ordinance. It's kind of a large, single-family home, suburbanized pattern of development in a natural area that is difficult to develop. And I may be inclined to look on it differently if it seemed like there was more effort through a PUD or something to try to preserve more canopy, provide a more densely packed, creative project. But I just don't see that here, or what the public benefit is. I have a question of, in terms of if critical slope waivers aren't approved, does the project become constructible feasibly? And yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of where I'm at this point. I would vote against it.
I'm wondering, former Mayor Slaughter made a comment earlier tonight about sending it back to the Planning Commission to have like an archaeology assessment done or some further.
She was interested in 2 things. One is the archaeological question, and the other is whether they had the benefit of the arborist who had said you've actually got nowhere near as much tree preservation, canopy preservation as you're talking about. Those are her 2 issues.
So I guess if we deny the waiver, then the developer can propose something else, right? Or just develop on the bits that aren't critical slope as they would by right.
Well, I mean, certainly they could proceed without the waiver. I mean, whether they wanted to submit a new design, a new plan for a different version of waiver, I'm sure they'd be allowed to. Whether they would feel it was appropriate or a good idea is another issue. So, 2 questions. First of all, do we have any more questions for the staff?
It's only 9, Mr. Alfeli. Thank you for being here.
No,
Yeah.
like I said, 3 years since I've been in this room. So.
Yeah.
So the second question is, I know the folks in the back are saying, hey,
no.
Come on up. Tell us what you want to tell us.
Thank you very much. My name is Scott Collins. I'm a civil engineer on this project, representing Stanley Martin, and Lauren McCarthy is here from Stanley Martin as well to answer any questions. But thank you for allowing me a little bit of time to talk about this. What we put forward with this critical slopes waiver request is what we think works with this neighborhood. It fits in well with the surrounding neighborhoods, and it fits in on this piece of property. You have, like Matt Alfie explained, you have existing by right lots. So we tried to work with what we have and what we've been given, and that's what we've proposed. What's unique about the critical slopes waiver, there's 2 things kind of going on from what Matt talked about. One is, yes, these are platted lots that if we don't touch them, then we don't need a critical slope waiver to impact. So one way to get around this would be to shift the road over 20 feet, and those 22 lots that are affected by the critical slopes would have no impact from the existing road that we're proposing. Therefore, we would impact those critical slopes and move on. What we're proposing in front of you is what we're trying to go forward with, because we're trying to be upfront and say, this is the project that we're trying to preserve. And by doing this, we're actually preserving a 6.6 acre area of trees at the top of the development, no utilities within the area, no grading, no homes, no anything. that would be sort of a pocket park for the neighborhood that's currently enjoying this wooded area that's not public space. That area will be public space. So there is a public benefit that's being missed. There are 77 trees in that area that's being preserved. If this waiver request was denied, we would just ship the road. We would make those 22 lots the same width, the same area, and the rest of them would be, the rest of the area, not including that public space, would be developed for homes. There would be no public space in this development. The second thing is if you see where the stream is, it's where the existing right-of-way, the city right-of-way is, that 20-foot section of right-of-way. So if we actually go in and develop the road and develop all the lots outside of the critical slopes on those 22 lots, we develop it with the plan that we want. Once that stream goes away with the road, that critical slope is no longer, those critical slopes on the existing lots are no longer within 200 feet of an existing stream because it's not there. So is that area really critical slope anymore? These are all questions sort of out there, that ways to get around it, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to come forward with the city staff, city planning, and city council to say this is a development that has public benefit for what we're providing with preservation of some type of public space. A little bit of affordability that we're trying to pull into this neighborhood and develop a project that works with the that fits in with the surrounding neighborhoods on the outskirts of the city property. If this was closer in to the city, we'd absolutely be going more forward with a PUD or something more dense. But this is the outskirts. This is almost to the city line. You usually go dense to to less dense as you get to outside the city area. And that's where all these existing homes out there are on the outskirts of the city. And they're expecting when this piece of property is developed, it'd be consistent with their existing homes. So that's what we're proposing to go forward with a consistent development that's consistent with the other neighborhoods, that ties in with everything. It doesn't overtax the roads or anything else, and it provides a public amenity space that has 77 trees. And as far as the overall tree canopy, we counted the number of trees on the property. It was 577. We did a simple math, tried to project what that canopy is, because when you have trees in a dense area, the canopy is not as large as a tree by itself. It has a chance to grow out. And so when you look at planting the trees, street trees and perimeter trees on the lots, that tree canopy starts to come back. Yes, it takes a long time. There's no question, but it does come back. And that's what we're proposing. We felt like we've really put a lot of time and effort to create a great plan that's what they want to do, that fits in with the overall character of this area. And that we're not trying to sidestep or get around regulations, but that can be done too. So that's what.
Thank you. I'm trying to find in the Planning Commission report the actual materials on what you're describing. So it sounds like at some point you lay out what would happen if we gave you the critical slopes waiver and what would happen if we didn't. And the end result is we get a worse project if we deny the critical slopes waiver. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
So where do you propose that the stream is going?
I'm sorry, the stream?
Yes.
The stream would be impacted. It's in this existing city right of way.
Right, but you're saying that if we give you, you were talking about the stream disappearing.
The stream you can impact. That's one of the acceptable impacts of critical slopes is roads and driveways.
But what do you propose the water is going?
The water would go to a stormwater management facility, as it does currently now. That part would not.
So you're saying that you will somehow get rid of the stream?
Yes.
That is there?
You'll pipe it or?
We'll pipe it. Mm-hmm. The same method we're doing now, yes.
Right. So just a couple of quick follow-up questions. Is it Matt? No, Matt mentioned about the sewer needing to be pumped. How would that be handled? Was that just way back in, I don't know, 60s, whatever? Is it, how would this site propose to handle it?
It's a combination of lowering the existing sewer, sanitary sewer in Mount Vista Road, and filling the site, the bottom half of the site up a little bit. And that gives us gravity sewer out to.
So you wouldn't need a pump?
Would not need a pump.
So some of the emails that we received says that that there were like over 1,000 trees of 8 in meters in diameter. I mean, I know we can get into it. That's really not a tree. That's a twig or whatever. So, maybe you can't answer this, but I wonder where the 400 or 500 trees is a big difference. I'm just wondering, like, what are you counting? Maybe what are some of the emails and things that we receive? You know,
Our Stanley Martin hired a surveyor here, a local surveyor here in town, to go out and survey all the trees on the site that I believe were 5 or 6 inches or larger. Okay. And they marked them all, and they measured them, and they accurately surveyed them and took a shot. We took that information, translated it into our site plan. So that was all done under paid surveying for the property. Tree canopy, I don't know if he went out there and just counted everything. Nobody contacted us about that or about being on the site, so we have no idea what they did.
Right.
Mr. Alfie, I have a question for you, if I may. With all the work that we have done to daylight streams, is there anything that would mean that a project that would undaylight a stream have to come forward?
Unfortunately, and a lot of the complication to this comes to that this has been platted. So you have a right-of-way that runs over the stream. If this was, again, just a blank piece of land and someone said, I'm going to go in there and subdivide, lay out new roads that the city would accept, the city would have a lot more say in where those roads would go. But we're not dealing with that situation. We're dealing with, there's I believe there's, I don't know if we can pull up, the applicant had the site plan.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it.
Look at. Yeah. I'm going through the planning commission documents now.
If we can pull that up while they're working on that, but if you're looking at what was at Planning Commission, you'll see there's a 20-foot right-of-way that covers, this was, back when this was platted almost, you couldn't have tried to plat this worse.
Yeah.
Like they platted it where the right-of-way, the 20-foot right-of-way is right in the V of the valley. So it goes right over any intermittent or permanent stream. So would we want that now as a city? No, we wouldn't want to, but we're dealing with, again, existing platted areas. Piping the stream would be a very typical engineering practice when you already have it in a right-of-way.
And a lot of that stream is the headwaters at the point where there's an existing outfall pipe from city right-of-way, from the existing city streets, that actually outfalls at that location. That's the start of the stream at that point. So it's basically a continuation of an existing outfall of an existing city street.
You're talking about as it comes off of Azalea?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, goes about 20 feet and then suddenly,
yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'm going to forward this document on to Mr. Sanders. I'm wondering if you could share, it's on like page 65 of the Planning Commission packet.
Yeah, I believe there was a presentation that Mr. Dillon Hunt might have to be able to pull up. I think it was just maybe one page or a few page PDF that showed the critical slopes and the layout. I don't know if Mr. Dillon Hunt can pull that up.
I think I emailed it to staff as well before this meeting, if they wanted to refer to that.
One of the disadvantages of being in this room.
Yes.
I mean, the crucial issue is whether if we deny the critical slopes waiver and the developer builds what they can by right,
will the city get what, for the neighbors and the rest of us feel like is a worse project than if we allow you to if we grant the critical slopes waiver and it looks like you're going to put a little park or something at the top of the ravine. But I myself would like a little more understanding of the trade-offs. So if we could bring up the map, the plan, that'd be helpful.
And I would just, I'm in the same boat, and it's difficult in every situation because an applicant has an incentive to present to us that if we don't approve it, it will be worse. And it could very well be accurate, but it's difficult for us to independently evaluate some of the claims that are made. But in any case.
So while we're waiting, the work on the critical, the sewer, in order to make it flow, will you have to impact the critical slopes to make that happen?
We would have to, the sewer runs up the road. Utilities, that's a requirement of the city ordinance, is to have sanitary sewer in the roads when possible. So we would fill the roadway, which is a permitted, which we'd filled in order to create the road, which is a permitted impact.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't need a critical slope waiver to do that. And the sanitary sewer would be in that roadway, and it would serve the lots.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this up to Sam. It's a very large, here we go. It's on page 72 of the attachment.
It looked like he's trying to,
Oh, great.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure what it is that I'm supposed to be sharing for you, but
I mean, it's the same thing that was on the planning commission.
Yeah.
This map works.
Okay. So I guess if you could locate us where the park is going to be.
They would have to slide plan right. There we go, right there.
So this is up at the top of the gully.
Yeah, a gully doesn't really exist at that point up there, but yes, that is the top of the area. Yes,
Top of
sir.
the area.
Top of the site.
Okay. And so if we didn't grant, and so basically all of the green that we see there in the middle, the dark green is part of the critical slope?
Yeah, that darker color, it's more like a blue.
here?
Yes, that's an impact. That's an exempt impact.
An exempt impact.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
Associated with the roads and driveways.
Okay, and what does that mean? How is it exempt?
It's public infrastructure.
Okay.
Which is exempt from the requirements of critical slope waiver.
Okay, so a public infrastructure that is being installed for this project by a private developer is exempt from the critical slope waiver because it's
A public utility or?
That's correct, yes, sir.
So will we own it at the end of this?
doesn't make sense to me.
So councilors, under section, so 341120B7C outlines area. In the critical slopes, you have to provide a buildable area. So it talks about a buildable area. And then it lists what's exempt from buildable areas. This things you don't have to provide a buildable area for, which means they're exempt from critical slopes, which are driveways, public utility lines, and appurtenances, stormwater management facilities, and other public facilities necessary to allow the use of the parcel. So,
okay, that's pretty generous.
So well, the best way to think about our critical slope waivers under this section is Critical slope waivers under Section 34 under zoning are for private development, not for public infrastructure. Things that are going to be public infrastructure are exempt.
And we're saying that this street, when it's installed, will be the city's.
Yeah, so that's one of the crux of this, is that right-of-way, that 20-foot right-of-way was platted as a public right-of-way back in 1919. The city never took action on it, so they never accepted think of it as a paper street. We have tons of paper streets.
Yep.
So if someone was to ever improve the right-of-way to city standards, then the city would accept that street as a public street into our city maintenance and street network.
We can probably see it better if we go back two sheets, if we can, in this presentation. Yes, right there, existing conditions. So that probably shows it better. It has the underlying lots. In the green, it shows the critical slopes, and it shows the existing right-of-way. And so what I was talking about is right now we have the proposed road, which is 40 feet wide, over top that existing 20-foot wide city right-of-way. If we wanted to get around this issue of a critical slope impacts, we're getting a waiver for the critical slopes, we would take that road, as opposed to having it centered on the 20-foot right-of-way, we would take the road and shift it plan down, so that the right-of-way of that 40-foot line falls exactly on the right-of-way, the upper part of that right-of-way of the 20-foot line. Therefore, those 22 lots that have critical slopes, that green area on it.
At the top?
On the top, would stay the exact same lot. And then we would develop the entire site as these lots, re-subdividing the remaining 60 some odd lots to the wider lots, and we would develop those 22 lots as is, or do a land disturbance with those 22 lots as is. The stream would no longer be there. And with the stream no longer being within 200 linear feet of those critical slopes, those technically are no longer even critical slopes. So at some point, I'm sure we would either go back and replat those lots, those 22 lots, wider, and do more lots on this site than what we're proposing. Not a whole lot more, but 4 or 5 more lots, and not do that 0.6 acres of public space at the very top of the site where we're preserving 77 trees. So we would develop the entire site, not do any critical slope waiver request, and not do any public benefits on the site. And we're also giving away, well, not giving away, we're dedicating 2 of the lots for Habitat for Humanity at this point too, so that would go away, I'm sure, too. So that's why what we're proposing in front of you is better than going a different route that would still be the same result, if not worse. Well, it would be a worse result from a public benefit standpoint.
Are those topographical lines 2 feet?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that certainly changes things. So can you put that back up, Sam? So those critical slopes at the top up there, you can still build things on those lots even if they're critical. You just can't disturb the part of the parcel or the part of the lot that is a critical at a certain elevation. Is that right?
We can disturb the critical slopes in that lot. We can't alter the lot width, the lot area. If we alter that lot area, then we would need a critical slopes waiver.
Okay.
But the fact that it's existing lot, if the lot remained in its current state, which is a little bit smaller than what we're proposing to build, then we would either have to build within that area or get a critical slope waiver. But once, I guess if we go out there and if the creek no longer, if we go out there and build, we could either go build those, we'd have the choice to either build a much smaller lot on each of those 22 lots and then build, build the larger units and re-subdivide the other lots. Or, my other question is...
You just build a smaller home on the ones that are with the green at the Plan North.
Right.
On those particular lots, you would just build smaller homes.
Right. Or go back a year from now, once it's already filled and graded and disturbed, those critical slopes don't exist anymore. We'd probably just go back and re-subdivide them and do larger lots and ultimately do what we're here tonight talking about.
So, Mr. Alfeld, once a property's been developed and they get the CUO on it, a year later they can come back and reassess what a critical slope was?
Well, what Mr. Collins is bringing up, and I can't necessarily disagree, but I'm not going to say it's absolute because it would take engineering talking to our engineer. There's a formula to determine critical slope. It has to do with distance from a body of water, the slope, and the run. And so when you take those calculations, you get a critical slope.
Sure.
What Mr. Collins is saying is if we built the road, the body of water goes away, can you really call those critical slopes? I'm not prepared to say that's right or wrong tonight. I think our engineering department, we as a city keep a map that's the critical slope. It can be debated. An applicant would need to submit an exhibit to Public Works Engineering to say I believe your map is wrong. These are really those aren't critical slopes. That's a process that Public Works Engineering would be better to speak to. I understand where Mr. Collins is coming from in his argument. I'm not in a position to say whether that's correct or not.
And if I can add on to that, that's not what we're proposing to do. I don't like that approach. I don't think that's the honest way of going about developing. That's not my practice.
Sure.
And that's not what I'm proposing. That's why we've gone the year process to do it this way.
Okay.
To show what we actually want to do and proposing to do. I don't like backdooring things. That's not my approach, and that's the conversation I don't want to have with Matt and his team.
I've also just got a question about so this is platted,
Correct.
and let's say everything's denied and it gets moved like that, but then that's not where it was platted, so how can it get moved like that?
So that, as long as the lots aren't touched, they're exempt because they predate the critical slope ordinance. So I don't want to get into speculation what lot lines got moved, but yes, if a lot line got moved, it would need a critical slope waiver. So it just depends on if the applicant's giving up more land plan down so the right-of-way in the center is only 20 feet, which is not wide enough you cannot build a city standard road in that width. You would need at least, I believe,
40.
Yeah, we'll say 40. I don't think it's a straight number, but we'll say 40 feet. So another 20 feet needs to be dedicated. So if you're dedicating 20 feet just to the lots planned south, you haven't touched any of the lots planned north, and now they have a city road that they front on. There's still existing lots of record. Now, if you dedicate right-of-way plan north, yes, you're touching those lots. You need the critical slope.
But what about this idea of then redoing the lots up further?
So the lots up further, they're not, only the green is in critical slope. So
But if that happens, doesn't that negate some of the platting?
Well, think of each lot as individually platted. You can move around the lots. That's the other thing. It's very, so this isn't a development. These are 88 plus platted lots. So it's not, you could move the lot lines on some to the north, leave some in the center alone. They're legal non-conforming lots of record. And the provision in the code is, I know I've already said it once, let me find it here.
Just out of curiosity, do we know what zoning this would fall under in the new?
It's general residential. I don't know
It would
what
still stay
zoning.
general residential?
Yeah. Currently, it's still, I mean, it's R1S,
And then,
lowest
okay.
density.
I wonder if Mr. Dawson is on the line?
Probably not.
He is not.
Okay.
But under, so 341145 allows the boundary lines of non-conforming lots to be changed, size, width, or both, so long as they do not become more non-conforming. So we run into this all the time, again, at 1 or 2 lot scale. You have, think Fifeville, you have small lots there, someone needs to adjust the boundary line. Well, you have both lots are non-conforming. This is at a scale we don't see that often because there's not that many of undeveloped parcels, undeveloped areas in the city, so you just don't see it at the scale where you could be doing boundary line adjustments by 80 different boundary line adjustments.
And the other point I would just return to again, which I think will have to remain ambiguous that we won't get an answer to, is what is the line, to probably oversimplify, what is the lines on the sheet of paper versus what is feasible logistically and financially that actually becomes constructible?
Well, yeah, fair enough, but I think, I believe this gentleman is doing his best to tell us the truth in terms of, his engineering practice and, trying to essentially minimize harm from this development. And as I see it, in this case, not granting the critical slopes waiver produces more harm. This is going to happen by right, one way or the other. And, even though I must have gotten 50 emails on this, people telling me to deny this waiver, as I understand it, it looks like if I deny this waiver, it's going to make for a more harmful project. So I don't, that's what you're telling me. You've got your stamp on there, I think. Short of bringing in Mr. Dawson to do essentially a peer review, which is not really what he's supposed to be doing at this stage. Unless we just kick this can down the road, I don't know that we're going to get more information in 2 weeks that will make any difference.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to, if others have more questions, I don't want to rush it. I don't have any more questions. I would just say I'm in the same place. We've gotten the argument from the developer of the project. The counter argument we've received is, hey, one, what realistically gets built may not actually be that, and two, from a tree canopy and environmental perspective, the by right development, even if it were to happen, is maybe not really actually much worse than what's happening if the amount of tree canopy loss has been underestimated. Which is to say, I value I weigh heavily the recommendation from the Tree Commission, as well as former officials who were involved in crafting this critical slopes waiver, who have been environmental lawyers, saying that this is not actually in the environmental best interest of the city. And I'm just still in a place where I have a hard time using our authority to facilitate a kind of development that is expensive, maximally environmentally destructive, suburbanized. And I recognize that there's a lot of ambiguities and it's difficult, but that's where I'm at, and I'm still planning to vote against the critical slopes waiver.
So even if denying it makes a worse project in terms of the impact, or you just don't believe that it does?
Looking at the information from the Tree Commission and some of the dialogue we've got from former officials, I question whether that's accurate.
Do I remember correctly that the Planning Commission voted basically 6-0 in favor of? Yeah.
Very reluctantly, but yes.
Well, and one of the things that has always struck me, to me, probably the person on the Planning Commission who is most attentive to critical slope waivers is Hosea Mitchell. And Hosea basically said, and I think both he and Rory Stolzenberg said something to the effect of, I'm convinced that this project built this way would be better than the alternative. I'm really struck by, I want just a piggy little question, and there is on the plat, and I know the plat's no longer up, but you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a lot that has no building on it whatsoever above the street there. What is that? What's going on there? Do you know what I'm talking about? No. If you were to come in from Azalea and go to the left, it's like the third lot on the right, and it's an extra wide, a little bit longer lot.
Yeah, if you're talking about that, it's like it's kind of a missing tooth. It's owned by the property owner whose front's on Mount Vista. So ultimately, they may want to subdivide their property because their house is on Mount Vista and develop that parcel.
I got you.
But that's their option.
I was just looking at that and thinking, what's going on there? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, the other question I have is, and maybe I'm not familiar enough with how to read these plats, but as I walked around on the parcel, and I'm sorry if I invaded anybody's personal space in doing so, there are a lot of really impressive beech trees on that property, and some of them are designated on these plats by particularly wide canopies indicated. Everything is much too small for me to read at this point because a 24 by 36 sheet has been shrunk down to get onto my 15-inch monitor. But is there a way to say, okay, those trees are definitely going to be saved? Do we know that can be done?
What we've done is proposed to preserve 77 trees at the upper portion of the site because that area does not need to be filled in order to build the road and get the public utilities to the site to service the rest of the development. So when we looked at it, we were like, yeah, you could possibly try to save some of the trees on those critical slopes, but that would be, you have the road up here, then you're filling down to the part that where the fill from the road hits the critical slopes and comes right back up, and it's creating sort of an erosion issue right there. And then how you manage it, and then you'd have utilities in that area. Those trees wouldn't survive anyways.
So it's fair to say that basically everything that is not part of the reserved would-be park is at risk.
Yes, sir.
So, just quickly follow up on that. Someone called in and said that part of those trees that are planned to be reserved will actually die without, I don't know, the root system and, maybe being on a slope or coming, down part. So, what can we do to make sure that those trees that we are planning to preserve are actually, don't kind of get caught in the crossfire of, the construction?
So, Councilor, I can address that. One of staff's recommended conditions, and that Planning Commission also recommended would be creating a tree preservation protection plan that would be created during site plan with the city's urban forester. Should be in your packet as part of the proposed resolution. It lays out the language for that, which talks about monitoring, talks about how they would be preserved in perpetuity. Excuse me. But that's one of the proposed conditions from staff.
Is there a chance that area could be deeded to the city as a park?
Well, one of the other conditions staff's recommending is that there is some sort of action taken that preserves this as public land. It doesn't specifically say park, but it could be deed restriction, it could be something in the covenants, but that is another condition, that there must be something that basically is memorializing what the applicant is calling out in their plan. They're calling out in their plan preserving open space that's used for the public. Staff's recommendation is a condition that has to be something that is recordable, and then that they're proposing preserving approximately 77 trees. Staff saying there needs to be a document tree preservation plan that is approved by the urban forester, and that is also enforceable.
And so would that be attached to the approval of the critical slope waiver, or would that happen as part of the site plan review?
So the way staff has written the conditions, and city council can alter the conditions, but those would go with the critical slope waiver. You have to meet these conditions as part of your critical slope waiver.
And that's the way this one is written?
Correct, yes. I have it in the old staff report, but it should be in the resolution, but it talks about the applicant shall work with the city's urban forester during site plan review to create a tree protection preservation plan for approximately 77 trees as presented in the application materials. The applicant shall perform all protection preservation measures as identified in this plan. The tree preservation protection plan will include a monitoring program to ensure compliance throughout the construction period. The plan shall also include preservation such as easements, deed restriction, or other legally binding measures to ensure preservation of trees in perpetuity.
So, Scott, we've been talking, it's hard to believe that this was on the consent agenda because it's a pretty big project. So we just been talking back and forth. If you could just make it crystal clear for me, what do you think will happen if this critical slope waiver is denied?
I think 100% of the site will be developed. There will be no preservation area for a pocket park. There will be 0 or maybe 1 to 2% max preservation of any trees on the site. And it will all be developed. We will develop on the 66 or so lots. We will establish those lots to the lot size we'd like to do, and on the 22 that currently exist, we will build homes on those 22 lots as they currently are platted, or we'll be talking with staff a year from now when the critical slope waiver doesn't exist on this property, or when the critical slope process is revamped like it's already being talked about. One of the two ways.
Thank you.
Where is this? I'm sorry, Matt. It's in the resolution?
I don't have the resolution, but it's typically part of the resolution the attorney's office puts together.
Page 41 is the resolution. Page 41 of the
I don't see any
Part of
reference
the
to tree
packet.
preservation.
Because it would have gone along with Planning Commission's, because Planning Commission's motion was to recommend approval with conditions from the staff report. And those were the, there were 10 conditions in the staff report. I can, Council, if you don't mind, I can bring you up the. If it's not in the resolution, if you do, I would recommend adding them to the resolution if this body, that was Planning Commission's recommendation, was approval, but with the 10 conditions.
Yeah, the resolution that's been prepared for us does not include those conditions.
I don't see that, yeah.
Let's see, do we have the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting?
There, yes, you have to hunt for them. I don't know about the minutes. I'm sure they're,
Or what, I mean,
I've got the packet from that night.
yeah, but I think that, I'm not sure that the packet included the
motion is
conditions as
also in
approved.
the staff report. They used the motion from the staff report.
Oh, they didn't make any changes to it?
Correct. There were no changes.
Okay.
The staff report that's in our thing tonight?
No, the staff report that went to Planning Commission.
Yeah, I think that's part of the struggle here. It feels like not everything that was, I guess the assumption is that we'd go back and read everything that they had to say, which normally I do, but there's no reference in our resolution to any kind of conditions. I would think that we would want that.
We definitely want that.
Here, Lloyd, these are, that's from,
So the conditions that were added, recommended conditions, the applicant shall work with the city's urban forester during site plan review to create a tree protection and preservation plan for approximately 77 trees as presented in the application materials. The applicant shall perform all protection and preservation measures as identified in this plan. The tree preservation protection plan will include a monitoring program to ensure compliance throughout the construction period. The plan shall also include provisions such as easements, deed restrictions, or other legally binding measures to ensure preservation of trees in perpetuity. 2, the applicant shall, through easement, deed restriction, or other legally binding document, ensure that no development or tree removal within the 0.6 acre public amenity area ensure no development or tree removal within the 0.6 acres public amenity area as presented in the application materials. This document shall be enacted, this documentation shall be enacted prior to approval of final site plan. 3, the applicant shall memorialize the landscape screening as presented in the application materials prior to approval of the final site plan. Planting within the screening area shall be a mixture of deciduous and evergreen trees, and the remaining trees will be large and medium deciduous trees as stated in the application materials. In addition to providing the minimum, 4, in addition to providing the minimum tree cover requirements as required by code, the applicant shall preserve approximately 77 trees as shown in the application materials. The preserved trees shall not count toward the minimum tree cover requirement. 5, site plans should include a minimum 4 stages or phases of ESC controls. The first phase shall include initial preliminary controls. Outfalls from any proposed traps shall be established with rigorous independent ESC controls early in the sequence prior to the establishment of a sediment trap and associated conveyances. 6, any channels or diversions that convey clear water shall be stabilized with sod on the clear water side immediately after installation. 7, super silt fence, chain link backing shall be installed where perimeter silt fence is specified. 8, any disturbance occurring outside of conveyances to the trap in either sequence or space, planned or unforeseen, shall be immediately stabilized with sod. For pervious areas, utilities should have other same-day stabilization. 9, at no time shall concentrated water be directed toward the critical slopes without adequate conveyance down and beyond the slopes to an acceptable outfall. And 10, the final plan should include a Virginia Stormwater Management Plan that includes a design for on-site water quality provided by a facility or facilities designed in accordance with the BMP Clearinghouse 2013 draft design specifications for practices 1 through 15, or a proprietary manufactured treatment device acceptable to DEQ at the time the final plan is submitted. The facility or facilities should provide 110% of the on-site phosphorus removal required as determined with an accurately completed VRRM spreadsheet for the project. And those are the 10 requirements that should be a part of our resolution. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
So, having thus read them into the record, we could go ahead and incorporate those 10 conditions and move forward if you want to.
Yeah, I will be voting, I'll be voting for the waiver, so.
So let me talk a little bit about some of what I've been grappling with in all of this. The first is that, I mean, I've been down to the site a couple different times, including just recently yesterday, and it's really a remarkable place. It is remarkable first for the fact that there are huge beech trees all over the place. I'm told that some of those trees are 80 years old. I don't know what the history of the site was 80 or 100 years ago. It's also clear that there are still some fallen chestnut trees down there. You can tell because the wood, even now, 100 years later, is still there, but it's red. It's really red. You know that that's a chestnut. It's an area where the water is really, I mean, there's a reason it's called Azalea Springs and not Azalea Stream. It's got a few springs there that make things a little bit wet, but there's really not a lot of water down there. There's enough so that the trees that fall across it provide bridges to some extent. But it's really, I was just very taken by the place. Unfortunately, I've always figured that if the city wants to preserve places like that, we have an obligation to buy them. And if we don't buy them, or we don't want to buy them, then developers have a right to do what the law permits. And so, to me, the idea that we would simply say, somehow or another, we would make it so that they could not do any developing down there, to me, is a pipe dream. It is something that, unless we're able and willing to buy the property, and that's not one of the options available to us at the moment. We don't have, certainly, we don't really have the authority legally and probably to a certain extent morally to say we're not going to let you use the property for a legal use because we think that 100 years ago somebody should have made some different decisions. And on the other hand, I mean, and this is where I'm struggling with it all, the ordinance governing critical slopes is one of the very few places in the zoning code that talks about site plan kinds of issues that really gives city council any discretion. It gives us the power, in addition to, there are 6 different things that we can be specifically considering. 5 of them are very much site plan, stormwater kinds of issues, and the 6th is the broader question of tree canopies and things like that. If we don't have the power in effect to say thou shalt not disturb these trees, then, and frankly when I was thinking about it today, I hadn't focused on the fact that we've got 88 separate little parcels that we're dealing with. I just think we're kidding ourselves if we think that we're going to be able to say that no matter how glorious those beech trees are, that they're just not going to get saved under any rational development plan. Even if they were saved, they'd probably be saved for a year or 2 or 3 before they would die because of the disturbance to the land. So I'm kind of coming around to the wisdom of Hosea and Rory in thinking that I really think that the reasons to vote no that I was seriously considering earlier today, I guess I'm considering voting yes at this point.
Yeah, and I know we've discussed this to death, but my final thought would just be, having observed applications both for critical slope waivers and SUPs, in almost every case we're told that if it's not approved, then the alternative will be worse. And in some cases, that definitely has been true. For example, the by right Class A luxury office space we got across from Friendship Court, instead of housing, it's even taller than what was originally proposed. And in other cases, we've gotten projects, including ones that the Planning Commission approved, where that didn't turn out to be accurate, and the applicant came back with a significantly better project, sometimes with twice as much or more affordable housing or better design. And my only fear is just if we create a situation where all an applicant needs to do is say, hey, we could do something even worse, so you should approve it, we become afraid to say, hey, we just expect better. And I do think it's interesting, the discussion, that we all seem to agree that this project will make the city a worse place. The only rationale for approving it is that not approving it might be a little bit extra worse. But all that said, I do understand and appreciate the difficulties around it, but I'm in the same place.
I just have one more clarification because this is rolling around in my head. So we understand what you will do, Mr. Collins, if we don't approve it. Why exactly are you asking for a waiver?
We're asking for a waiver because we're asking to be upfront with what we want to do. This is what we proposed, that this is what Stanley Martin would like to build. The larger, little bit bigger lot works better for the current product that they would like to put in this neighborhood. If they want to come in and build, instead of a 25 or 30 foot wide home, build a 15-foot row home, they can do it. It's a very attractive building that's done in Richmond and Charleston and other towns. It could be done here. They'd have to develop a different product, but that can be done, and they can build it. So they have the right to go forward and build that type of unit, 22 lots, 15 foot wide, 60 foot deep, 70 foot deep.
I think Mr. Payne would be fine with that as an alternative. Yeah, I mean, more density would be certainly something we'd be interested in, which sounds like what you're describing, a very dense, yeah.
Right, and that was we've been working with the residents, the neighborhood, we've been talking with them, and they're certainly the loss of the wooded area. This is why we're proposing this 6.6 acre area as a public amenity that they could use. We also hear from them their concern about more density, more traffic, more everything. And this was sort of a compromise, what we thought was the best development to go forward in an infill parcel, recognizing the fact that everything else around it has been developed, has been existing neighbors for 30, 40 years. Sure. So we're not looking to come in and sort of present something that's just so radical in this area that gets other people concerned about other aspects. We're just trying to be good stewards and develop this property in conformance and with the rest of the neighborhood. And this is what we landed on as a way of being a benefit to the entire area and to the city. And that's why we're coming forward with this plan.
Well, if there's more question or discussion, I don't want to cut it off, but is anybody prepared to make a resolution? I'm prepared to make one. I think it would lose, but is anyone else prepared to make a resolution?
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Good evening and Happy New Year. I'm Lauren McCarthy. I am the president of Stanley Martin Homes in the Charlottesville division, and sorry to keep you all here so late. We know that this has stirred a lot of conversation, and I wanted to speak on our behalf in that we are in the business of building homes, but we also build neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are very important to us. And when this assemblage came together, there was the opportunity to just go in and build, 88 houses. And that doesn't fit with the current neighborhood. We have
while this didn't require a public hearing, we've gone to great lengths to meet with the public. We've had a site plan, online conference where we invited the public and had conversations with them. Our team has met homeowners on home sites, and we've had many phone calls, many meetings about this. And the reason that we're here in front of you is Scott, I don't need to repeat everything he said, but we feel like that this design really best reflects the current area that's there. We're trying to maintain as many trees because that has been a concern, the walkability of the area with sidewalks. We've tried to address as many concerns as we can, and although the current neighbors that we've talked with feel like this density is too much, we're going to be looking at 30-foot wide houses. So while they're not the 15-foot row homes, they are more in line of single family. Some would be 2-story, some would have basements based upon the grade.
So very similar to the houses in the existing neighborhood.
That's correct. So that's the reason, council, that we're here in front of you, is that we are trying to be upfront and say we don't think that whoever plotted these original lots didn't really take into account the existing grade and the current homes that are there, and the current zoning.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I am prepared to change my mind from earlier and move this resolution.
With the 10 conditions,
Yeah.
as previously stated.
Yeah, I need to pull up. Yeah, I mean, what you're hearing from us is just a kind of visceral response from the neighborhood to be losing this really lovely area. I can see how there are the wider social benefits that you've mentioned, and we certainly need more housing in the city. It is one of the few times I would have voted against housing because of an issue with tree canopy. Most of the time, I feel like when people bring that up, it's sort of a reason to get away from density. But in this case, I think there's a real loss that's going to happen. At the same time, I find Mr. Collins' presentation about basically the optimization you've tried to do with this site, with the notion of preserving these trees at the far end. You're a professional, and I'm confident you're telling us your professional opinion. So that's where I stand.
Was that a motion?
No, not quite yet, Michael. Not quite.
Sorry.
My second thing, no, just kidding. So I move the resolution approving the critical slope waiver for the Azalea Springs subdivision, subject to the
10 conditions
the 10
previously read.
commission, the 10 conditions the planning commission affixed, and as were read into the record earlier.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I think we've discussed it to death.
Yep. Ms. Thomas?
Councilor McGill?
No.
Councilor Payne?
No.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
And motion passes 3-2. Thank you all. So that gets us through our general business. Other business, are there any other business items for consideration?
Yes, Mayor Snook. I have an announcement that. Did you read this?
Would you like me to?
Yeah.
I will read this.
Thank you.
On behalf of Councilor McGill, this is a statement she has written and prepared. Again, this is from Councilor Sina McGill. This evening, I have the regrettable news that I must step down from office. The needs of my family have changed during my term in office, and in the last few months, it has become more and more apparent that I cannot meet the needs effectively of both. At this time, I cannot be the mother I need to be and also provide the service to the people who elected me that I committed to. This has not been an easy decision, as there is much I still want to do for this city, but right now I need to focus on my family and their needs. Thank you for allowing me to serve you. Again, that is the prepared statement from Councilor McGill this evening.
And
Thank you, Cena.
Counselor, I believe you had said another email that you would expect your last day to be January 11th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And
I want
so,
to make sure that I can, that there's a particular meeting that always struggles to have a quorum, so I really don't want to.
sure. Okay. So, under our code and under the state code, actually, there's a specific procedure, Virginia Code Section 24.2-228, for appointing to a local governing body to fill a vacancy. When a vacancy occurs in a local governing body or an elected school board, the remaining members of the body or board, respectively, within 45 days of the office becoming vacant, may appoint a qualified voter of the election district in which the vacancy occurred to fill the vacancy. If a majority of the remaining members of the body or board cannot agree or do not act, the judges of the circuit court of the county may make the appointment, and that's if we don't act within 45 days. The person so appointed shall hold office until the qualified voters fill the vacancy by special election, which in this case would be the upcoming election in November in any event. So effectively, we would be appointing somebody to complete the calendar year of 2023. Any person so appointed shall hold office the same as an elected person and shall exercise all powers of the elected office. And again, this is within 45 days of the day the office becomes vacant, which would be January 11th. 45 days would put us to roughly 24th or 23rd or so of February. After consultation with the city attorney's office and also thoughts that I had expressed to the rest of you all, my suggestion is that we now call for applicants of people who, and basically following similar to what the county just did when they filled a school board seat, that we call for applicants, people who would like to fill out this one-year term by, I just picked January 30th. Basically, it's 3 weeks away. It gets us to a Monday. It's, of course, not a Monday. It's a council meeting. That we have a public hearing for comments, endorsements, et cetera, on February 6th, and that we commit to making a decision no later than February 21st. So that would get us within the 45-day time frame. I would suggest that we leave open the procedure after February 6th and we can figure out for ourselves what's going to happen between the 6th and the 21st, see how that evolves. We have a meeting set for the 21st, so we would presumably make the decision at that point. I had submitted this to everyone for thoughts. I got a few thoughts back saying, looks good to me, or words to that effect. Does anybody have any other thoughts about ways we should proceed?
It seems reasonable.
Okay. Should we have a vote on that?
So will this kind of be on site so people can go and click on to understand how to apply? I don't know if it'd be an application or just.
Well, Ms. Thomas asked me when I submitted this suggestion, she said, what do you mean, what kind of an application do you want? And I said, well, I was writing it at 3:45, and I said, not in the next 15 minutes, but let's talk tomorrow. So
okay.
We'll get something figured out tomorrow.
Can you restate those critical dates again? So
yeah, the dates that I'm suggesting is that we call for applicants by January 30th. It'd be the last Monday in January, basically 3 weeks away. That we would have a public hearing for comments, endorsements, and so on the following Monday, February 6th, our regular meeting, and that we commit to making our decision no later than February 21st. By my count, the 45 days would run out on February 25th.
Okay.
So we would want to get it, or maybe 23rd. So we'd want to get it done by the 21st.
Okay, thank you.
Should we have a motion of some sort to implement those?
Yes, I move to implement the proposal just stated by the mayor to fill the seat that's being vacated by Councilor McGill.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I guess we should probably have a roll call vote. I don't know that we need it, but
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
Yes.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 5-0. And obviously, Councilor McGill, and we spent a lot of time together over the last really 4 years, 3 years on council and 1 year going to so many meetings and so many forums and everything else. And I will say that I have always valued in particular your awareness of, knowledge of, sensitivity to problems of mental health, problems of social services in general. It's an emphasis that I personally don't have, and I have valued your contributions, and I've relied on those contributions, and appreciate your helping for all this time, and we'll miss you.
And likewise, just echoing that, I would just like to thank you for your service and time on council. I know the past 3 years have not been easy at all, not just with the political environment in Charlottesville, but a global pandemic and the impacts that's had for everyone and their families. And I know this isn't a decision that you've come to easily, but I know that it sounds like it's best for you and your family. And like Lloyd said, I've always valued your perspective working in homelessness and mental health care services and that focus on everything we do. And I think your voice and perspective will be missed on council. And I hope we really don't lose sight of the focus you've had throughout your life on homelessness, social services, mental health care, and things that it's easy for local government to overlook. And finally, it's just been a pleasure working with you, not just politically colleague, but as a friend. And I know you'll continue to be involved in the community, and you're someone who's willing to give their shirt off their back to help anyone. And I can attest to you saving me late at night when my tire burst in my car. But
That was a strange phone call.
But thank you for your service, and I do wish you the best for you and your family.
Yeah, and I just want to concur with that as well. Last year when I was first elected, from the day that I was elected, Sina, you open up your knowledge. And even last year during the storm, about this time, you were willing to open up your home when we lost our power shortly. So, and just like Michael said, you'd be willing to give the shirt off your back to those in need. But, as we have these 221 meetings, you have been my partner with that, and we have just been able to work really well together. And so we're just going to miss. It's been so many times that with us 4 gentlemen up here, what we have missed out on what we would have missed out on if you didn't say, hey guys, what about so-and-so? We're like, oh yeah, we're so glad that we have you here. So it's just things like that. I think that we're going to realize that we're going to miss you more and more, but I'm happy that you understand that you had to make this decision, and that council and community will always be here. So we're not going anywhere. So thank you for your service to the community, and look forward to seeing your neighborhood.
And our phone numbers.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. Definitely will miss you, and have been grateful for your support and friendship over the years, ever since we were on the board of Region 10 together. And I know this has been a very hard decision for you, and I admire your courage in doing it and looking out for your family.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, councilors, do we have any questions for city management to follow up on? We're going to spend all of our time trying to figure out what we do about a new councilor, but okay. Hearing nothing, we're now at the final speaking opportunity for members of the public. Speakers will be given up to 3 minutes. Join the speaker queue by selecting the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar or pressing *9 if you've joined by phone. There's nobody here in council chambers, so is there anybody online?
Yes, Mayor Snook, Tanisha Hudson has her hand raised.
All right, Ms. Hudson?
You are on with council.
Well, what we got here. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. I gave you all a little break over the holiday period. Very interesting meeting tonight. Mr. Pinkston, once again, you definitely proved that you're definitely pro-development. You haven't turned down one yet. Didn't expect anything to change going into 2023. Cena, very sorry to see you go. But I'm a mom. I get it. I understand. Family should and always will remain first in my life, and it should always remain first in yours as well. So from a mom to another mom, I mean, what can I say? That's just something us women have to always make a decision on when it comes to family. So I commend you for putting your family first. It's not always easy to do, going up against jobs, but sometimes we have to. So from a woman to woman, we don't see eye to eye on many things, but we're gonna always see eye to eye, woman to woman, and mother to mother. So I definitely commend you on that. And Michael, thank you for the no vote. I've definitely seen you step up a lot in these last couple months. You've really stepped up. So I have to give credit where credit is due. Again, new year, new year, new levels, new heights. So don't think I'm going anywhere. Still here. And you'll be seeing a little bit more of me, unfortunately. So I wish you all well. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Hudson. Anybody else?
Mayor Snook, there are no additional hands.
All right, so nothing left to do but to adjourn to our next meeting will be Tuesday, January 17th, following the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Thank you all. We're adjourned.